All right, everyone. I apologize if I'm starting so early because my Stream Deck isn't playing well with Stream Elements. It was playing okay, playing just fine when I started, but it stopped working, so I just decided to jump right into this. At some point, I'll redo the way I organize my streams so that I won't have that 5-minute intro. It'll be just a small intro, or actually, no, I'll go straight into streaming like I am now. And then I'll have a kind of an introduction. Then we'll do the the branding, and then we'll get back into the stream. And I'm also thinking about doing some other things. It's just a matter of figuring out how the hell to make them work. But I got my sounds working from VoiceMod. I checked really quickly for some advice on this, and they said basically in the sys tray, end on VoiceMod, and end the Stream Deck software, and then start the VoiceMod first, and then the Stream Deck, and it seemed to work just fine. So it's working now. I'll go ahead and give you an example of it here. This is kind of the sound I'm planning on playing for someone who is new to the channel, who just popped in because we just started giving us those new the messages from Twitch saying, hey, this is a new person, which is awesome. So this is, oh, sorry, wrong one. Hold on. No, this one here. So you play that to welcome people who are new to the stream, so they get the air horn in the crowd. That's another way to kind of increase the oh hey, I'm here sort of a thing, which is kind of good. Yeah, so what is happening with me? Not a whole lot. Let me actually go ahead and... So, there's some stuff happening here. At work, I finished putting together this intranet site for accessibility. I spent months working on it, and it finally went live on Friday. It's a soft open, and then Monday we'll have the official hard open so everyone knows about it. So this is awesome. There's a lot of stuff there, especially training on how to create accessible content and stuff like that I put together, but I still have easily another 2 years worth of work to put into it to get, all the stuff out there that I want to. So that's huge. That's just I'm working on this forever, and it's been kind of, this last week or two has been kind of a stress because we just want to get it out there. But we had the amazing team there that helped us work through work through getting it out there. It's in SharePoint, which it's okay. I'm not a fan of SharePoint, but that's the option that I have. So I put all there in SharePoint, and the SharePoint team was amazing working with us to get that done. So that's out there. It's in the wild, and super mega ultra happy. What else is going on? So writing. So I'm back into doing some writing, specifically with the... I'll go ahead and pull this up. Now you're going to see everything. I can't even see everything. I'll bring this over here. I'll show you. Because I keep remembering Girly Bear asking about this. And I'm going to share my screen. Where the hell is the screen? There you go. All right. Oh, you still can't see everything, so let's go over here. I should have to come up here. Well, I'll go down here. So I've got these two infographics that I've shared with you guys on occasion. So I started working on this again some more, but more importantly, not this, but the Google document that goes with this. So there's links to this. It's called, just search for Scarcity in Discord if you want to see this. So that is there, and I don't think there's a link to this yet, but this is something else I'm using in it as well, talking about the scarcity is what drives, well, societal structure. So that's another thing I'm working on. But the actual paper is, I've done a significant change to this document. I made a copy of the previous document, and I'm restructuring the whole thing. So it's humanity's journey through abundance and scarcity, and back again. And this may end up being a piece of, I kind of talked about before that I would like to put a book together, and this will probably be part of that instead of going on my policy site. Or I don't really know yet how I'm going to use this, but it's I'm working on it. Currently it is 46 pages, but that's including all the facts and stuff and the correlatives I've put together, and actually the research I've put together, and a bunch of images. So it's probably actually about 35 pages of writing there, and I'm just kind of getting started. You can kind of see over here, if you can. Actually, you can see here, this is probably going to go away as well. This is like 4 pages. I don't know. We'll see. I got to figure out what I'm writing and how I'm how I'm going to talk about it and how everything's going to put together. So, the age of relative abundance, which is in the Pleistocene, the age of scarcity, which starts with the Holocene, the Neolithic age, and that'll go into the age of debt and monetary systems, and the echo of the breakdown from the Paleolithic society as it's echoed today with climate breakdown. And then the next part will basically talk about how my policies are that what we can use to get that age of abundance, and how resource-based economy is the society of abundance. So that's kind of what I'm working on there. I started doing a bunch of writing on this and stuff, so that's good. I'm glad I'm back to doing that. All right, let's get back to... And if you want access to that document, that is I have added that to the Discord thing. I've switched it out with this new one. If you search for scarcity in Discord, it'll find that, the infographic, and the link to the Google Doc as well if you want to take a look at it. If you're that bored. It's very rough, so keep that in mind, and I'm still working on it. It's going to be months and months before I get that done, because there's a lot of research and writing to go on it. Okay, what else? All right, so that's the basics. I mentioned I want to do changes in the stream. I found this. How will this work? Okay, that's not so bad. I really like this. You don't see half of it. Let me... this is by Dune. Is this the right one? Dune. Yeah, Dune Film. Here it is. I love this guy's work. I don't know who. I think he's from Turkey. I can't find any other place for his work. Every place that I found where his work is, it's always you have to pay per month, and your access to his work is only valid as long as you're paying for this subscription service. So, which is annoying. And this one here, I think, has most of his work. These are the ones that I've seen, and it's like for a full year, it's about $250, and it's not so bad. 20 bucks a month or something like that. It's not really that bad, but still, you pay that every year just to have access to this. So I'm gonna play this for you. I think this is beautiful. The music isn't included because that's right here, but you can kind of get a feel for it. Now this is in. Oops. I have a version of this. Wait, how loud is that? I found one place to download it, but it's in After Effects. I don't know After Effects, so I want to find some place where I can do this in DaVinci Resolve. So it's just beautiful. I love it. I'll show you some of his other work. So these are what I'm hoping I'll use for my new like screens, topical screens. If we're gonna switch to a new topic. I don't know what I'd use this one for, but this is another one of his works. It's just really good. Let me show you one that I might use. Okay, let's go down. Yeah, like here. So, here we go, I like this. We'll go here. Like, if we're gonna talk about space stuff, this might be the transition screen that we'll use. Maybe a 3, 4, 5 second transition screen like this. Preview. Just to, spice things up a little. It's kind of what I'm thinking about, but I have to get access to these first, and I'm not quite to the point where this is in Premiere. I need to find them in DaVinci Resolve. I do have access to After Effects because I have a subscription to Adobe, but then I have to learn a whole new software. So if one of you are out there and you would like to help me with this, I might consider that, because then I can have you just, there'd be no rush on this. If I'm able to subscribe to this and then get the ones that I want, I can send you the text and stuff, and then you can just do it fairly quickly, hopefully. Then I can use it. And then I can eventually learn how to use it myself. So, this is a thing. It's out there. I like his work. Yeah, so, there we go. That's kind of what's happening with me. Any questions, comments, or suggestions before we move on? Anything? Anything? Captions are working too, that's good. Anything? Let me know if you can't hear me too, because that's kind of a problem if you can't. Topic of discussion. I'm pretty sure we've probably covered this, but I don't remember doing it, and I don't have it. I don't think I have this in one of my my Cancer of Capitalism post or something else like that. So I have to get a post like this and put it in there because this is kind of important stuff to understand. Anything? Anybody? All right. So, and I'm not really prepared today. Like I have been pretty much since I started streaming again. But this is just 8 men own same wealth as half of the world. This is from 2017. Right. Let's go back up here. January 2017. So this is a bit old. I'm sure that number's gotten worse. I'll need to find another version of this if I can. All right, so again, 2017. This is January 2017, so this is 5 years old. 8 men own the same wealth as 3.6 billion people, who make up the poorest half of humanity, according to the new report published by Oxfam today to mark the annual meeting of political and business leaders in Davos. Oxfam's report, An Economy for the 99%, shows that the gap between rich and poor is far greater than had been feared. It details how big business and the super rich are fueling the inequality crisis by dodging taxes, driving down wages, and using their power to influence politics. It calls for fundamental change in the way we manage our economies so that they work for all people and not just a fortunate few. New and better data on the distribution of global wealth, particularly in India and China, indicates that the poorest half of the world has less wealth than had been previously thought. Had this new data been available last year, it would have shown that 9 billionaires owned the same wealth as the poorest half of the planet, and not 62, as Oxfam calculated at the time. Winnie Byanyima, executive director of Oxfam International, said, quote, "It is obscene for so much wealth to be held in the hands of so few when 1 in 10 people survive on less than $2 a day. Inequality is trapping hundreds of millions in poverty. It is fracturing our societies and undermining democracy. Across the world, people are being left behind. Their wages are stagnating, yet corporate bosses take home million-dollar bonuses. Their health and education services are cut, while corporations and the super rich are dodging their taxes. Their voices are ignored as governments sing to the tune of big business and a wealthy elite." End quote. Yeah, and this is pretty much it, right? It's socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the 99%, right? That's the problem, right? There's no problem with governments, especially here in the U.S. They're just showering the rich and corporations with money, and then they invoke austerity for the 99%, right? That's just the way it is in neoliberal fascist states like the United States, and it's horrific. And as we talk about modern monetary theory, the politicians all talk about it as such that in order to spend money, we have to balance the budget, which is completely and totally incorrect. Actually, balancing the budget or even have a surplus is very harmful to the people, harmful to the 99%, because it basically creates a recession and a depression and or recession if you have a balanced budget, or if you have, especially if you have a surplus. A surplus is devastating. If you start talking about cutting back the debt, the national debt, that means cutting back the money that is going to the 99%, and that's austerity. Austerity is violence. Austerity is economic warfare. And that's what the 99% get, whereas the the rich and the corporations get socialism. Yeah. And if the people truly understood how federal fiscal policy works, that poverty and austerity is a policy choice, people would be up in arms and their heads would be rolling. Which is why all of the politicians support this, because that's how they make their money. That's how the corporations keep getting rich. That is what the politicians are paid to maintain. They're paid to maintain that narrative, so that socialism for the rich and austerity and economic warfare and poverty and suffering for the 99%. It's harder to exploit the 99% if they're well taken care of, and if they're educated and they can vote, and all that sort of stuff. If they're not struggling, they're harder to control. So it's important to make sure that you keep the 99% struggling. All right. Oxfam's report shows how our broken economies are funneling wealth to a rich elite at the expense of the poorest in society, the majority of whom are women. The richest are accumulating wealth at such an astonishing rate that the world could see its first trillionaire in just 25 years. To put this figure in perspective, you would need to spend $1 million every day for 2,738 years to spend $1 trillion. Now, again, this is from 2017, so this is 5 years old. These numbers have changed radically since the pandemic. Yes, I definitely have to find an update for during the pandemic. I'm sure that number has gone down from 8 down to probably like 6 or 5 people. But let's see. Let's continue with what they have to say. Maybe if someone has a link to that, a more up-to-date link on how these numbers work out for during the pandemic, that would be great. Public anger with inequality is already creating political shockwaves across the globe. Inequality has been cited as a significant factor in the election of Donald Trump in the U.S., the election of President Duterte in the Philippines, and Brexit in the UK. 7 out of 10 people live in a country that has seen a rise in inequality in the last 30 years. Okay, look at this. Editing, space. There's a space there. Annoying. Between 1988 and 2011, the incomes of the poorest 10% increased by just $65 per person, while the incomes of the richest 1% grew by $11,000 per person, 182 times as much. Now that's the incomes. I don't know if this is technically incomes, because a lot of rich people don't have incomes. Depends on how they define this. Because a lot of them will take loans on their stock and stuff like that, and so they don't actually have an income that is taxable. It might be, income. You might be using income broadly, not as in work labor, but as in work income, as in any money that they take in to spend. But I don't know. We have to look at the report. Women who are often employed in low-pay sectors face high levels of discrimination in the workplace, and who take on a disproportionate amount of unpaid care work often find themselves at the bottom of the pile. On current trends, it will take 170 years for women to be paid the same as men. So yeah, that's one of the things that I don't know if I have read posts on String here talking about how taking care of the home and the children, raising a family should be considered work, paid work specifically, and that's something that that UBI would look at taking care of. That way, like they're talking about here, women find themselves in taking care of most of the unpaid care work, often for their children, and they are the ones who suffer disproportionately because of the austerity of U.S. American politics. UBI would help fix that. An economy for the 99% also reveals how big business and the super rich are fueling the inequality crisis. It shows how, in order to maximize returns to their wealthy shareholders, big corporations are dodging taxes, driving down wages for their workers, and the prices paid to producers, and investing less in their business. So if you haven't, let me go ahead and pull this up. If you haven't, Moneyless Society. If you guys haven't signed up for their Patreon, please do. I've done that, and they have some interviews and some commentary that are just content that is just for Patreon supporters. I think the last one that they released was like this week, which was an interview with Richard Wolff, the economist. He was amazing. And it was a really great interview. And he was talking about democracy in the workplace and how that can really transform things. A lot of the way that he talks about democratizing the workplace is stuff that's in my policies right now. I didn't have to add anything to encompass his ideas, and it's a good thing. So it means I'm, hopefully pretty much near where it needs to be to help making the world a better place. So it was an hour-long interview, and Richard Wolff did most of the talking because he's a great presenter, a great interview person. So it was really great. So sign up and support the Moneyless Society, help them out, and then you get access to some of this stuff too. So, it's not a sponsored segment, by the way. I just support them because they're important. All right. Oxfam interviewed women working in a garment factory in Vietnam who work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and still struggle to get by on the $1 an hour they earn producing clothes for some of the world's biggest fashion brands. The CEOs of these companies are some of the highest paid people in the world. Double space here. Look at this shit. Single space, double space. Someone needs to do some space editing on here. Oxfam, get it together! Corporate tax dodging costs poor countries at least $100 billion every year. This is enough money to provide an education for the 124 million children who aren't in school and fund healthcare interventions that could prevent the deaths of at least 6 million children every year. So I've talked here on stream how to fix this. Some of the ways in my policies I talk about is we'll use the economy for the common good, which basically says if your company violates these certain rules, then your rating on the scale, like maybe 1 through 5, A through F, like grades for schools used to work, that if you have a shitty rating on human rights and human support and shitty rating on the environment, your taxes go up. Now, one of the ways we can do, one of the metrics we can use here is what is the income disparity, and a wealth disparity even. I haven't really talked about that in there, but I should put that in there. The wealth disparity between the lowest paid worker that is used by your company, including companies you hire to do stuff. Like if you're going to use a company in Vietnam who's paying their people $1 a day and who are violating basically U.S. laws for pay and healthcare and that sort of stuff, then your taxes go up. So that would be one way we could solve that issue here. Another way would be, I talked about this a few weeks ago, is that we need to change how the definition of what companies are. Currently, the only thing that matters for companies is profit. That is the only thing that companies have to do is maximize profit, and that is the fundamental problem, because that is all that businesses. That is the only way businesses are held accountable. So for me, profit should be a tertiary thing that they look at. The first should be, if not the first two things, which are maybe on the same level, how is your business doing, giving back to humanity, and how is your business creating a regenerative environmental impact? So how are you doing for humanity? How are you doing with the environment? And then you get rated on those things, and then your rating can go through like A through F, and then your taxation and stuff gets changed based on that. And then tertiarily, we can look at profit. So the first things businesses should be rated on for taxation, all this sort of thing should be impact on humanity and impact on the natural world. And if and then eventually we get to looking at profit and economics. So then that really changes what companies are going to concentrate on. Human rights, environmental, regenerativeness, and then eventually we get to look at their actual profits. So we'd rather have a company that's got shitty profits but is doing great at human rights and is doing great at paying their workers well and doing great regenerative environmental work and is losing money. They may be doing great there in the two most important areas, even though their economics are shitty. Well, we can still give them money to subsidies to help make sure that they keep doing what they're doing, even though it's profitable, because it's doing great for the people, great for the environment. That is what matters, right? And then those who are shitty in the environment, shitty for their workers, those are the ones that would lose access to federal and state and local contracts, but they would also have taxes increased on their CEO, the top level people, as well as having taxes increased on the company itself. So that's how we can kind of deal with that. The report outlines how the super rich use a network of tax havens to avoid paying their fair share of tax and an army of wealth managers to secure returns on their investments that would not be available to ordinary savers. Contrary to popular belief, many of the super rich are not self-made. Oxfam analysis shows over half of the world's billionaires either inherited their wealth or accumulated it through industries which are prone to corruption and cronyism, which is pretty much all of them. It also demonstrates how big business and the super rich use their money and connections to ensure government policy works for them, right? You're not rich unless you can afford to purchase a purchase a senator or member of Congress, right? For example, billionaires in Brazil have sought to influence elections and successfully lobbied for a reduction in tax bills, while oil corporations in Nigeria have managed to secure generous tax breaks. Yeah, this is... As long as we're within a monetary system, this will always be the case. The rich will always have more money and a disproportionate influence upon the political structure. Yanima said the millions of people who have been left behind by our broken economies need solutions, not scapegoats. This is why Oxfam is setting out a new common sense approach to managing our economy so that they work for the majority and not just the fortunate few. Governments are not helpless in the face of technological change and market forces. Here's another double space. If politicians stop obsessing with GDP and focus on delivering for all their citizens and not just the wealthy few, a better future is possible for everyone. True dat. Oxfam's blueprint for a more humane economy includes... Let's see if they have any more double space. No, single space. Single space. Sorry, I'm distracting myself. Single space. Okay. Double spaces are an anomaly here. Governments end the extreme concentration of wealth to end poverty. Governments should increase taxes on both wealth and high incomes, to ensure a more level playing field and to generate funds needed to invest in healthcare, education, job creation. Okay, so... Get back here. So this is 100% correct. My policies do that. I have a minimum wage, a high minimum wage, and a low maximum wage, at the maximum wage, the marginal tax rate is 100%. And I also have a wealth tax too, which helps to bring down the wealth disparity. And that's true. That's exactly what we need to be doing there. Now the other side, and to generate the funds needed to invest in healthcare and job creation, this is incorrect. Because this operates under the false assumption that in order for the federal government at least, to fund universal health care, to fund universal education, to fund a Green New Deal, federal jobs guarantee sort of a thing, that it requires tax money to pay for it. And that is 100% incorrect. 100% incorrect. On the federal level. On state and local governments, that is true. But on federal government, it's as simple as Congress passes a bill, and then the congressional spending accounts have a bunch of zeros added to it, however many billions, and then Congress spends. There is taxation has nothing, nothing, nothing to do with spending on the federal level. I'm going to go ahead and put in my, where's my, it's over here. Here it is. I'll put in my page here on modern monetary theory. I don't have like 100% of everything on here, but it's a great place to start. There's this amazing resource, a book, or actually, it was a book that I purchased. It was like a dollar or something like that, and it was also on a website too, where this content was originally created, and it explains using very simple diagrams how modern monetary theory actually works. If you haven't learned about that, please go and take a look at it, because it's very, very important to understand why you should be even more pissed off, and why we can afford all of these things, because we can. All right. Hopefully you can't hear the police. I'm not sure what the microphone is picking up here. And please let me know if the sound is okay, if my voice is okay, if the music is okay, and so on. I don't want to... I have to keep changing it all the time. All right. Governments cooperate rather than just compete. Governments should work together to ensure workers are paid a decent wage and to put a stop to tax dodging and the race to the bottom on corporate tax. Okay, so they should, but there's no economic incentive to do so. Especially those countries which are more corrupt. The people who are rich, especially those in government, make a lot of money off that corruption. So it's very hard to find that incentive to do so. Government support, an easy way to do that is much just what I talked about as far as policies. Using economies for the common good, and ensuring businesses that are using unethical businesses for business partners, and increase their tax on them. And it's an easy way to make sure that gets done internally. You can greatly affect the businesses of the world by engaging economies for the common good, because companies that do deal with shitty businesses get extra taxation on them. That provides an economic incentive to do better work, to have better business partners. Okay. Governments support companies that benefit their workers and society rather than just the shareholders. Yep, that's exactly 100% what should be done. And that's when I talk about our business entities need to be reformed to take into account how they affect humanity and the natural world first, and then look at profit afterwards. That's how you deal with that. The multi-billion euro company Mondragon, I'm not sure how to pronounce it correctly, is owned by its 74,000 strong workforce. All employees receive a decent wage because its pay structure ensures that the highest paid member staff earns no more than 9 times the amount of the lowest paid. Okay, so this is fucking awesome. The next level up on the level of awesomeness is to change the maximum wage to be equal to, have everyone have the same wage. I've talked about Dan Price and his gravity payments, how he made the wage for everyone in his company $70,000, right? So everyone gets paid exactly the same, and it's a good, livable, if not thriving wage. And that's, if Mondragon wanted to take it up a level, that's what they would do. Governments ensure economies work for women. They must help to dismantle barriers to women's economic progress, such as access to education and unfair burden of unpaid care work. Right, again, universal health care, universal education, and UBI would be the way to help deal with that. I agree at 100%. Women and people of color are the ones who disproportionately suffer from the economically austere policies of neoliberal fiscal policy. Oxfam is also calling on business leaders to play their part in building a human economy. The World Economic Forum has responsive and responsible leadership as its key theme this year. They can make a start by committing to pay their fair share of tax and by ensuring their businesses pay a living wage. People around the globe can also join the campaign, even at up.org. Okay, let's when is this? This is in 2017 as well, so this is a while ago. Note to the editors. Okay, so here's the world's 8 richest people in 2017. This is going to be wildly different today. I mean, very different today. Bill Gates, we know him. Amancio Ortega, Spanish founder of Inditex, who owns the Zara fashion chain. Warren Buffett, Carlos Slim Helu, Mexican owner of Grupo Carso. Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Larry Ellison, American co-founder and CEO of Oracle. Mike Bloomberg. Right, let's see if we can find. Let us see if we can find. Something more up to date than the bottom. Okay, top 1% of U.S. households hold 15 times more wealth. Bottom half. Here we go. This is September. This is very, very recent. Bottom half of America. This is from the 29th, so this is just from about a week ago. I'll go and throw this in here for you. See what they have to say to get some more up-to-date information. The bottom half of American families hold just 2% of the country's wealth, while the top 1% of families have a third. Go the fuck away. Over the last 30 years, that is 30 years. Over the last 30, that is 30 years, America's richest families have gotten even richer, while everyone else still hasn't recovered from the Great Recession. U.S. families in the top 10% of the wealth distribution added about $60 trillion to their wealth from 1989 to 2019, while the bottom half of Americans just added under $1 trillion to their total wealth during that same time. That's according to a new report from the Nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, CBO, which assesses how family wealth has changed from 1989 to 2019. The report requested by Senator Bernie Sanders shows just how uneven wealth distribution is in the U.S. and how the rich have only gotten richer. The increase in wealth over the 30-year period was unevenly distributed and concentrated near the top of the distribution. The report said the total wealth held by families in the top 10% increased at a faster rate than the wealth held by families in the rest of the distribution. Yeah. Look at that. Oh, this is the bottom right here, the bottom 50%. Look at that. And then this is the middle part. They definitely got an increase here. Not a big one, but they got an increase. And then this, sorry, top 10% skyrocketed. Look at that. While Americans at the top have seen their fortunes grow tremendously over the last several decades, families in the middle haven't been able to build wealth as easily as in the past. Research has found that from 1943 to 1973, it would take the typical American family around 23 years to double their wealth. But since 1973, it now takes over 100 years. Okay, so 73 is when... So that was during Nixon. Or did Carter start then? I think Carter started then. Was president then. But Nixon was before that, because Nixon shifted us to fiat currency in 71, I believe. That's a huge difference. It's 5 times longer. Meanwhile, an inequality study analyzing 20 years of wealth data found a similar worldwide disparity in wealth, finding that the top half of the world holds about 98% of the globe's wealth. Oh yeah, so the global north. That comes after a study of 50 years of tax cuts for the wealthy found that the wealth did not trickle down, but instead worsened inequality. Who'd have thunk, right? CBO measures wealth as a family's holding of a variety of financial assets. The disparities in the distributions of those assets was only heightened by the Great Recession, with the 25th and 50th percentile of American families still not seeing wealth rebound from the pre-recession levels by 2019. At the same time, the 90th percentile saw their wealth not only recover, but grow since 2007. Okay, so... Okay, top 1%. Okay, so this must list their wealth, right? So it's going down a little bit. Now here. It's gone down a little bit more, and it's gone down a bit more too. Yikes. Indeed, in 1989, the families of the top 10% held 63% of the wealth. That ballooned. In 2019, they held 72% of wealth. Broke down even more. The top 1% now holds about a third of all wealth, up from a little less than a quarter in 1989. The obscene level of income and wealth inequality in America is a profoundly moral issue that we cannot continue to ignore or sweep under the rug, Sanders said in a statement on the report. A society cannot sustain itself when so few have so much while so many have so little. In the richest country on the earth, the time is long overdue for us to create a government and an economy that works for all of us, not just the 1%. And yeah, that's true statement from the Sanders man. Good stuff there. All right. Any questions on this topic? We're going to move over to, we're going to be watching some videos here on the whole nuclear saber rattling shit that's going on here. So questions, comments, and suggestions before we move on here. US, Russia, and Ukraine nuclear saber rattling. I don't think I have this in quite the right order. I'm not sure how this actually works out as far as time is concerned. Okay, we'll start here. All right, anything? We're going to watch these few videos so you can actually see what was said, and then we can kind of go through it. I don't know the exact time frame of this. I don't know who said what first, whether Zelensky said something, and then Putin said something, or if Putin said it first, and then Biden. I don't know. If anyone has the breakdown of this, I would very much appreciate that. I did some research this morning so I can bring this content up so we could look at it, but I don't know the exact timing of all of this. Let me move this over here. Anything? Anybody? All right, let's get this started. This is make sure I got my Oxford comma in there. All right, here we go. This is from The Guardian. Can I maximize this? Will this work? We'll see how well this works.
Мы сделаем все, чтобы обеспечить безопасные условия.
Nope, doesn't work. All right.
Для проведения референдума.
Okay, they have captions on, so we're good. All right, here we go.
Для того, чтобы люди могли выразить свою волю. И то решение о своем будущем, которое примет большинство жителей Донецкой и Луганской народных республик.
Let me start this over. I'm gonna read this to you.
Мы сделаем все.
We'll do everything to ensure safe conditions to hold the referendums so that people can express their will. We will support the decision on their future made by the residents of Donetsk and Luhansk, People's Republics Zaporizhia and Kherson regions. In its aggressive anti-Russian policy, the West has crossed every line. We hear constant threats against our country and our people. Some irresponsible politicians in the West speak not only about delivering Ukraine long-range weaponry missile systems that would allow Kiev to strike Crimea and other Russian regions. These acts of terror, including using Western weapons, are already being carried out in border regions in Belgorod. Even nuclear blackmail has come into play. We're talking not only about shelling of Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, encouraged by the West, which threatens to unleash nuclear catastrophe, but also statements by some high-ranking representatives
о возможности и
of leading NATO
допустимости
countries on
применения
possibility
против
and
России
possibility
оружия
of
массового
using weapons of mass
поражения.
destruction against
Ядерного
Russia,
оружия.
nuclear
Тем,
weapons.
кто
I
позволяет
want to
себе
remind those
изъявить
who would
нашей
allow
Хочу
themselves such
напомнить,
statements that our
что
country also has a
наша
variety of
страна
weapons of
также
destruction,
располагает различными средствами поражения.
that our country,
А по отдельным
and even in some areas,
более
even more modern
современным,
than
чем
those in
страна.
NATO countries.
И при
We will,
угрозе
without question, use
территориальной
all the means at our
целостности нашей
disposal
страны для защиты России и нашего народа мы безусловно
protect Russia and our
используем
people.
все имеющиеся в нашем распоряжении средства. Это не блеф.
This is not a bluff.
те, кто
And those who try to
пытаются
blackmail us with
шантажировать нас
nuclear
ими,
weapons
Должны знать,
should know that the
что
prevailing
розовый
winds
может
can also
повернуться
blow in their
и-
direction. All right, so that's the thing that Putin said about nuclear. I don't know. Again, I don't know. This is what this is in response to. I haven't had that much time to look into it, but ultimately says we have nuclear weapons. Some weapons more advanced than those in NATO countries, and we're not afraid to use them. And not just on Ukraine, but on others who might get in our way as well. That's a fairly big saber rattling right there. All right, so then let's go into the talk about what Biden said. This isn't huge. I don't want to spend that much on him. Did I? Yeah, he only said this one thing. We'll go through it real quick.
He, quote, is not joking. No cameras allowed in the New York City fundraiser, but the White House confirming the president went on to say, quote, we have not faced the prospect of Armageddon since Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis. The U.S. has repeatedly warned Russia that using nuclear weapons on the battlefield would trigger catastrophic consequences. President Biden also telling the crowd that Putin's army is, quote, significantly underperforming, and that if he is
Okay, so that's all he pretty much said. Let me throw these in. Let me throw these links, these videos in here for you, so you can look at them if you want. All right, and I couldn't find this on YouTube, but this is Zelensky's fairly controversial statement, and some took this out of, potentially took this out of, I don't say out of context, but misinterpreting it. Let's listen to what he has to say. We will talk about this really quick.
Що повинна робити НАТО?
Okay. I'll read this to you. I'll turn it down.
Що повинна
What should
робити
NATO do?
НАТО?
Eliminate the possibility of Russia using nuclear
Унеможливлювати
weapons.
застосування Росією ядерної зброї. Але, що важливо, я ще раз звертаюсь до міжнародної спільноти. Як це було до 24-го? Превентивні
We need
удари,
preemptive strikes so that
щоб вони
they'll know
знали,
what
що з
will
ними
happen
буде,
to them if
якщо
they
вони
use nukes and
застосують,
not
а
the
не
other way
навпаки.
around.
Чекати
Don't wait for
ядерних
Russia's nuclear
ударів
strikes and then
Росії,
say,
щоб потім
since you did
сказати,
this,
ах, ти
take
так,
that from us.
ну ось тримай від нас. Переглянути
Reconsider the way you apply
застосування
pressure. This is
свого
what NATO should
тиску.
do.
Ось
Reconsider
я
the
вважаю,
way
що повинна
it
робити
applies
НАТО.
pressure on
Переглянути порядок застосування. Що повинна робити
Okay, so when I first heard this, I thought he was talking about engaging in a preemptive nuclear strikes, which it could be interpreted that way, but it's not what his words directly necessarily said, but it could imply that's what he meant. But engage, he's saying preemptively engage in at least sanctions or whatever the response is to them doing nuclear weapons, to go ahead and do that now, so that we don't. Yeah, actually, doing that would basically say, well, this is what you can do to us, so we have no reason to not use nuclear weapons. So that would definitely backfire to an extent. Okay, here's another one. All right, we'll read this one really quick. So yeah, that is not a good idea. I mean, Zelensky, he's there just as a U.S. proxy to make sure things keep going and to help sow fear so that people keep voting and keep throwing money at Ukraine, so that we can keep the violence and keep everything going, so that and keep the pressure on Russia. Okay, so now I'll talk about how my policies deal with this. I did a little bit of updating as I did some research on getting this stuff together for you. But let's go ahead and go through this one. Did I share that? I did. Okay, let me throw this in here too. This is from the World Socialist website. This comes from yesterday. Biden warns of nuclear Armageddon as Zelensky calls for preventative strikes on Russia. U.S. President Joe Biden said Thursday that the world is at risk of nuclear Armageddon, implying that the rapid escalation of the war in Ukraine could lead to nuclear war between the United States and Russia. The American president said that Russian President Vladimir Putin was not joking when he talks about the use of tactical nuclear weapons. Biden said, "We have not faced the prospect of Armageddon since Kennedy and the Cuban Missile Crisis," saying that Putin threatened to use nuclear weapons because his military is, you might say, significantly underperforming. Now, this I don't know. As some are saying, I tend to doubt it. But this is better for the Western media to put out there to say, so that I can keep throwing money into Ukraine, because we're almost there, right? The Russians are underperforming, and we're going to get there, right? Biden added that he did not think there's any such thing as the ability to easily use a tactical nuclear weapon and not end up with Armageddon. Okay, sure. In February, Biden denied that the war could escalate to nuclear conflict, saying, "Well, I don't think Putin is remotely contemplating using nuclear weapons." In March, Biden said that the United States would not send in offensive equipment to Ukraine because it would lead to World War III. But since making these statements, Biden has massively expanded U.S. involvement in the war, sending so many high-end weapons to Ukraine that U.S. armories are running low. U.S. generals have directed Ukrainian missile strikes, including attacks on Russian territory, assassinations of Russian generals, Jesus Christ, and the attack on Moskva, the flagship of Russian Black Sea Fleet. And U.S. paramilitary forces are directly operating on the ground in Ukraine. Oh my God, I didn't realize we were directly there. Yikes. The United States has sent Ukraine hundreds of armored vehicles, as well as the country's most advanced anti-aircraft system, anti-ship systems, and medium-range ground-based missile launcher, the HIMARS, in an article published in September entitled "Why the U.S. is Becoming More Brazen with Its Ukraine Support." The Hill concluded the Biden administration is arming Ukraine with weapons that can do serious damage to Russian forces, and unlike earlier in the war, U.S. officials don't appear worried about Moscow's reaction. Over the past week, Russian President Vladimir Putin, Security Council head Dmitry Medvedev, and head of Chechen Republic Ramzan Kadyrov have all warned that Russia could use nuclear weapons in the conflict. Again, saber rattling. Earlier this week, the Times of London report that a train operated by the division of the Russian military that handles nuclear weapons was making its way toward the front line. Why the fuck would you put a nuclear weapon in the front line? That's stupid beyond belief. When asked about the report, U.S. Defense Department spokesperson replied, "I'm aware of those press reports. I don't have anything on that." Times of London also reported that NATO members have been secretly advised that Putin intends to carry out nuclear tests near Russia's borders or over the Black Sea. Why the fuck would you do that? You pollute the air, pollute the water. That's super stupid. On Thursday, before Biden's comments, Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelensky, at a meeting of an Australian think tank, called for NATO to carry out preemptive strikes on Russia to prevent the possibility of Russia using nuclear weapons. And we just saw that clip here just a little bit ago. What should NATO do? Eliminate the possibility of Russia using nuclear weapons, Zelensky said. We need preventative strikes so that they know what will happen to them if they use nukes and not the other way around. As has become standard practice, anytime a NATO-aligned leader blurts out what is being discussed behind the scenes, Zelensky's office claimed that the Ukrainian president was referring to preemptive sanctions, and that the actual words that came out of the president's mouth should be ignored. I don't think so. I think it was actually very... I think he was very careful in the selection of his words so that he can create more problems this way. He's very careful not to say preemptive nuclear strikes, preemptive strikes, right? He specifically left out the word nuclear. But I think that what he said was worded in such a way as to imply a nuclear strike by NATO. so as to sow discord and keep people all up in arms and stuff like that, and to raise the tension of the conflict. Against the backdrop of these events, the extent of direct U.S. involvement in the war is becoming clear. On Wednesday, The Intercept, in an article by veteran national security journalist James Risen, reported that Biden has authorized clandestine CIA operations inside Ukraine, likely meaning that American special forces are actually deployed in the country. The clandestine American operations inside Ukraine are now far more extensive than they were early in the war, Risen reports. There is a much larger presence of both CIA and U.S. Special Operations personnel and resources in Ukraine than there were at the time of the Russian invasion in February. Secret U.S. operations inside Ukraine are being conducted under a presidential covert action finding, current and former officials said. The finding indicates that the president has quietly notified certain congressional leaders about the administration's decision to conduct a broad program of clandestine operations inside the country. Now, again, this is the president engaging in, quote, police actions without congressional support. Not that Congress wouldn't support what he's doing, but any congressional action would be seen as a significant step. So this is a way for the U.S. and the military-industrial complex to get their bills without getting Congress and the politics involved with, war and stuff like that, which is highly problematic. That's part of my policies. That's something we need to fix. Any police operations or military actions and not war should still have to go through Congress. If our military is involved anywhere, or our forces of any site, even the CIA, that needs to go through Congress. Meanwhile, sections of the U.S. political establishment are calling for an even more aggressive U.S. intervention, providing Ukraine with missiles that would be able to strike into the heart of Russian territory. ATACMS, American Tactical Military Systems, would give the Ukrainians the capability to make Crimea untenable for the Russian Black Sea Fleet and for the Russian Air Force and logistics in Crimea. Retired Lieutenant General Ben Hodges, the former commander of U.S. Army Europe, told the Wall Street Journal. That would be a significant step in the eventual liberation of Crimea. ATACMS would accelerate the collapse of Russian forces. Washington Post columnist George Will called Wednesday on the United States to provide armed drones to Ukraine, including the Gray Eagle, the successor to the Predator, and Reaper drones. The immediate imperative is to supply Ukraine with the most sophisticated and dangerous U.S. unmanned aerial vehicles, UAVs, aka drones, which can be force multipliers for Ukraine's hard pounding of the Russians, Will said. Will effectively declares that Ukraine is a de facto member of NATO, calling for Ukraine to be given weapons that will help it produce battlefield results commensurate with its future status as a member of the European Union and formally or not NATO. Yeah, so this is what started it all. I don't have my lights on. I'm just really fucking up today, aren't I? Well, I got my I got my voice mod working, right? I mean, that's something. Is it working? Oh, it is, but I had it. There we go. Nah, see there. But I had it muted. That's better. Okay. So yeah, so that's what started this whole thing, right? The NATO's, well, not the whole, not what started, but what initiated what's going on currently is NATO was talking about joining, or Ukraine was looking at joining NATO. And that's what started the whole invasion sort of a thing. Now, to say that you want to make it a de facto member, that's really ratcheting up tensions. They're not actually a member of NATO until they are, even though the United States and some of Europe is very much helping to support them as if they were a member of NATO. So it's not really, yeah, it's not good. Nothing is good here. It's all bad. The rapid escalation of the war confirms the warnings of the World Socialist website of the immense dangers posed by the desperation and recklessness gripping both Moscow and Washington. As he wrote early this week, The reckless actions of governments that are leading the world to disaster must be countered by a global mass anti-war movement of the working class and youth. Yep, I agree. The working class must demand the immediate end to this reactionary war. It is necessary to unify the struggle by workers in defense of their social and democratic rights with the struggle against war. Yep. The building of a new anti-war movement must be based on the perspective of international socialism, rejecting all forms of nationalism and xenophobia, and fighting for the unity of workers in every country. Yeah, I agree with that. So there's some coverage on that. I won't go over this one here. Yeah, we don't go over that. Okay, and if you want to see his full speech, now he was speaking, where he said his words of preemptive strikes, he was in Australia speaking at the Lowy Institute. This is him speaking. You can hear it fairly well, and it'll also have someone dubbing over him. So, we're not going to watch this, it's 39 minutes, but if you want to, it's there. Okay, so that's basically the end of that. We're going to watch this small speech. It's 2 minutes, 51 seconds. There's clips of Jacinda Ardern from New Zealand and talking about how the UN failed in Ukraine war response. And there's a lot of good stuff there. And then we'll go ahead and look at my policies and talk about this.
We cannot be left unable to respond to global challenges because we encounter dysfunction or, worse yet, moral failings. In recent times, there has been no better example of that than the failure of the UN to appropriately respond to the war in Ukraine because of the position taken by Russia in the Security Council, a morally bankrupt position on their part, in the wake of a morally bankrupt and illegal war. Under these circumstances, waiting for our multilateral institutions to act was not an option for New Zealand. The war in Ukraine is unquestionably illegal and unjustifiable. Russia must be held to account. We all have a role to...
Okay, so all wars should be illegal, so there's that, but also unjustifiable, incorrect. I mean, go back to 2009, the treaty signed, I think by Ukraine, saying they're not going to join NATO, which they're looking at doing. The U.S. coup in 2014, and so on and so forth. There's definitely provocation.
...to play ensuring that happens. This is why New Zealand will intervene as a third party in Ukraine's case against Russia in international...
This is from July of this year, so this is 6 months ago. That's a good thing to keep into mind when listening, because I hadn't realized that this clip was that old, but keep that in mind when listening to what she's saying here.
...Court of Justice. We must reform the United Nations so that we don't have to rely on individual countries imposing their own autonomous sanctions.
Agreed, 100%.
We must also resource the International Criminal Court to undertake full investigations and prosecution of the war crimes and crimes against humanity committed in Ukraine.
So, as far as that's concerned, we definitely need to increase the funding for the International Criminal Court and stuff like that. But the issue there is that the group that the ICC would be used against the most would be the United States. The United States is one of the largest purveyor of terrorism globally, and that's why, that's why the United States will never ever support that, because the U.S. and its presidents especially, and members of Congress, are the greatest purveyors of violence. Oh, and of course the U.S. military-industrial complex too, the greatest purveyors of terrorism globally. So that so the U.S. will never support that, so it's never going to happen.
When expressing the principles of an independent foreign policy in this way, the principles of cooperation, values in place, it would be easy to give the impression of a nice, tidy matrix from which we sit down and make decisions. The honest reality is that the world is bloody messy. And yet, amongst all the complexity, we still often see issues portrayed in a black and white way. A few years ago, I had what I believe will be one of the greatest experiences of my life, visiting every atoll of Tokelau. Tokelau is a realm country of New Zealand made up of 3 atolls that are accessed via a more than 24-hour-long journey by sea from Samoa. Not too many people have the luck to go, but that doesn't mean we should take an out-of-sight, out-of-mind approach to their reality. Tokelau is low-lying. Some of their burial grounds are coastal. They've already had the devastating job of contemplating the relocation of grave sites in order to stop their ancestors washing away. The water has already begun to take out the coastal wall that we...
I'm shifting to sitting now, and you'll see that her words here are talking no longer about Ukraine, but they are talking about climate change and stuff like that.
We helped to create to slow down this inundation. And as weather events increase, I cannot tell you how much concern I have over the ability of us to reach this beautiful place and its wonderful people in a timely way. Climate change must be a foreign policy priority. While we all have a concern, and rightly so, about any moves towards militarization of our region, that must surely be matched by a concern for those who experience the violence of climate change.
So, yeah, I agree with her 100%. We kind of went over this probably last week or the week before, that it is the least... It is the countries in the global south that will suffer the most from climate change, and they are the ones who didn't do all of the climate stuff, right? It was mostly the United States and China currently, top 2 polluters historically and contemporarily. And it's the global south, India, Africa, who are going to suffer the most from the violence, systemic, shall we say, systemic violence inflicted by climate change. We saw that, we're seeing that in Puerto Rico, we're seeing that in Florida currently, and we see it in the floods and the fires and the droughts and all that sort of shit going on, right? So, yes, my policies talk about that too. We need a very, we need a reaction to climate change equal to its threat, and it needs to be considered a human extinction level event and go appropriately. So this is another meme I found. You know, Russia taking over a bunch of parts, Crimea, Donetsk, Luhansk, right? Is fine. It is unbearable, but nuclear weapons are fine. Did I share this one? Guardian News. Okay, I'll share this one. So you can see that, and so you can see that. Okay, that's it. Questions, comments, and suggestions on the nuclear stuff going on? Oh, actually, no, we're not going to do that. Hold on. We're not going to do that. We're going to go over here. All right, so there we go. That's better. So let's talk about my policies and how my policies kind of deal with at least nuclear arms and war and things of that nature. This is in, I'll share my policies here so you guys can see it. All right, so nuclear arms. We need to sign the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty with Russia. We need to sign the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. Nuclear war needs to be outlawed internationally as a crime against humanity and a crime against nature, which that is something that should be tried in the International Criminal Courts, the ICC, right? I need to add that in here. Each country should list the actions, such as sanctions, that it will take in case a nuclear power uses a nuclear weapon, so that there's no misunderstanding of the ramifications of doing as such. So this is something I added today in doing kind of getting the stuff together for this. Yeah, it needs to be very clear that anyone, you know, if they have nuclear weapons and they use it, that there's going to be ramifications. And what I've been saying previously is that, you know, I can't imagine anyone actually using nuclear weapons, because if you think, you know, how much Russia is suffering, they're not suffering as much as I'm sure the United States would like, but imagine the sanctions and stuff that will happen once Russia drops a nuclear bomb, or anyone drops a nuclear bomb. Yeah, so list out exactly what will happen to anyone who drops a bomb. We need complete and total global nuclear disarmament, including nuclear reactors, no exceptions. And I say the U.S. should be the one to start its unilateral global disarmament. I need to put that in there too. Oh my god. Hold on, I'm gonna write this down. And ICC. Okay. Yeah, and missile silos into sustainable bunkers. I mean, not that nuclear silos aren't in a place where there's lots of people, so this isn't really going to help a whole lot of people, but it's potential for emergency in case things get really bad. We can start moving people way the fuck out there in the middle of nowhere and deal with it. All right, so and the other thing, war is a crime against humanity in the natural world. War and any other form of militaristic conflict, like a police action, needs to be outlawed internationally. War needs to be treated as a crime against humanity and a crime against nature, and it needs to be prosecuted as such in international tribunals, especially as the world is suffering from climate change, to which any military action hastens. Anyone who engages in war needs to be boycotted, divested, and sanctioned by the international community. So, yeah, and also as a part of this, there definitely needs to be. It's fucking loud. There needs to be protests in the street for any country, any group that engages in war. That definitely needs to happen. So, all right, there's that. Any questions? We're done with this. Now we'll move on to John. Yeah, I shared that already? No, I didn't. Okay, I'll share that. Now we're getting out of the nuclear stuff. Spent an hour on that. Now we will move on. All right. Anything? Anybody? Questions, comments, suggestions? You guys awake? Anybody awake? All right, so this is Jon Stewart, who's awesome. The problem with gender binary with this is on his HBO special in his HBO program, The Problem with Jon Stewart. This is on the 8th, which was today. That's when this was released. Let's make sure I've got the... All right, so here you go. Let me know how the sound turns out. We're going to watch this.
We are in a new dawn of...
Hold on, let me... Captions.
We are in a new dawn of gender and sex complexity, where those who don't fit into a simple binary are meant to be seen with humanity. It wasn't always like this, people. As recently as, let's say, the 1990s, early 2000s, people were making shitty, reductive jokes about the subject. What can I say? The joke rhymed. And shitty and reductive jokes are kind of my brand. But as we know from history, any moment of progressive visibility will be met with a vicious backlash.
There are two genders.
There are two genders, and everyone knows it.
Ain't but two genders.
That last guy sounded like it's an emergency and we're running out of genders. Everyone, there ain't but two genders. I don't want to have to start rationing genders. The point is clear. The human race is defined by a simple binary, a black and white understanding. There are men and there are women, and never the twain shall meet.
Trump is an alpha male.
Well, okay, yes, there are obviously men who are more man than other men, but that's an aberration.
Beta, gamma.
Okay, there's an entire Greek alphabet, a continuum of masculinity, but that doesn't mean cuck,
Pajama boy, soy boy.
Girly man.
No, he's in there. I didn't notice that before. There's John right there.
I hope the children are out of the room. Clearly, masculinity appears to be on a dimmer, not an on-off switch, but ladies are different.
I was a big tomboy.
These purple-haired, angry freaks.
Rabid feminist. Cat lady.
High rolling bimbos.
Pretty girly girl.
My God, what a cruise line buffet of the gradients in American gender expression. Turns out there's a lot of non-binary shit happening between the binaries. But that hasn't stopped the traditionalists from deploying their newest weapon in the culture war arsenal, the obvious gotcha question.
The real basic question, what is a woman?
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
For all of recorded history, people have known what a woman is.
Okay, that is completely and 100% beyond incorrect. I just using the concept or the first peoples, the indigenous peoples, at least definitely here in the U.S., they've always had at least a third or a fourth or a fifth gender going on here. And in fact, the transgender community was seen as somewhat revered, holy, because they have both genders in them, shall we say. So I mean, that's for thousands of years, that's kind of what the first peoples, indigenous peoples, believed. So it's not definitely not forever. And also, yeah, okay, we'll go from there.
Yes! All of recorded history! It was simple. Until like a year ago. The answer to what is a woman has always been the same. It's, a woman is a deformity that occurred in the ordinary course of nature. I'm sorry, that's Aristotle. I apologize. I'm sorry, that's not what I meant. I meant a woman is a person who has no legal existence once married. I'm sorry, that's early American coverture law. That's not right. No, throughout history, it's not a gotcha question. A woman is 30 shekels. I'm sorry, that's Leviticus. Unless she's whorish, then a woman is a loaf of bread. That's Proverbs. Yes.
There you go. It's good stuff by Jon Stewart. Okay, so now we're gonna get caught into the stuff that I had from last week. Let's go ahead and move that over here. And move that over here, right? Yes, stuff I haven't read yet. We'll go through this. All right, questions, comments, suggestions. Now we'll get back into some of our normal stuff in the climate change area. Anything? Going once, going twice. Real quiet today. You guys awake? Let's turn that down a little bit. All right, good. All right, so this is from September 24th. This is from the Guardian. And Pope calls for courage in halting use of fossil fuels to protect planet. I don't know if we've read this or not, but we'll go through this. Pope Francis has called for courage in abandoning fossil fuels and lamented that older generations did not know how to protect the planet and secure peace. The Pope, who was visiting Assisi, St. Francis, right, of Assisi, the birthplace of his namesake saint, who was close to nature, told the people on Saturday that he was pinning his hopes on their efforts in working to save the planet and to make the world's economy more attentive to the poor. During his brief visit to the hill town in central Italy, Francis of Assisi, spoke to a gathering of 1,000 young people, some of them young economists. Others are involved in efforts, including startups, focused on helping the environment. The participants came from all over the world. Among them was a woman who recounted to the Pope how she and her husband were helped to flee Afghanistan after the takeover of the Taliban last year by an organization called the Economy of Francis, which is inspired by the life of St. Francis with his attention on the poor and others in need. The Pope said a world economy is needed that expressed a vision of the environment and the earth. Agree 100%. There are many people, businesses, and institutions that are making an ecological conversion. We need to go forward on this road and do more, Francis said. The pontiff cited an urgent need to discuss models of development Now is the time for new courage in abandoning fossil fuels to accelerate the development of zero or positive impact sources of energy, Francis said. Agreed? He told the young people, our generation has left you with a rich heritage, but we have not known how to protect the planet and are not securing peace. Well, no, we have known how to do it, but there's no profit in doing so. I mean, this war in Ukraine is all about profit. I mean, the fossil fuel industry is known for 50 years, but they've been paying dark groups to do anti-science and climate change disinformation. I mean, we know how to do all the things we need to do. We've got the knowledge, the technology. We just need the will to save humanity from extinction. But there's no profit to be made in doing so. So as long as we are within a monetary system, as long as profit is the primary driver for the way things are done, there's no way it's going to happen. So we're basically looking at, as I've said before, we're at human extinction. As long as we're beholden to profit, human extinction is guaranteed. He lamented a lack of creativity, optimism, and enthusiasm, and told young people that we are grateful to God that you are here. Not only will you be there tomorrow, but you are here today. Which isn't going to matter because the United States, the largest terrorist organization in the world, is going to, well, destroy us all. All right. There's that. I don't actually have a lot of stuff prepared today. Not as much as I probably should. Okay, I'm glad they're telling this. Over 7 months old. This is from February, earlier this year. World spends $1.8 trillion a year on subsidies that harm environment, study finds. Research prompts warnings. Humanity is financing its own extinction through subsidies damaging the climate and wildlife. Harmful subsidies is why is the Earth still funding the destruction of nature? Well, as I just said, right, there's no profit in not doing otherwise. As long as profit is the primary motive for business and everything else, nothing is ever going to change. Because there's no profit in saving humanity from extinction, right? Because all they care about is short-term profits in their quarterly earnings reports. All right, the world is spending at least $1.8 trillion every year on subsidies, driving the annihilation of wildlife and a rise in global heating, according to a new study prompting warnings that humanity is financing its own extinction. True statement. From tax breaks for beef production in the Amazon to financial support for unsustainable groundwater pumping in the Middle East, billions of pounds of government spending and other subsidies are harming the environment, says the first cross-sector assessment for more than a decade. This government support, equivalent to 2% of GDP, of global GDP, is directly working against the goals of the Paris Agreement. True statement. And draft targets on reversing biodiversity loss, the research on explicit subsidies found. Effectively financing water pollution, land subsistence, and subsidence and deforestation with state money. Yep, true statement. And that's why, I'm gonna turn my fan off over here. Yeah, and that's why my policies call for adding subsidies to all these organizations that are doing this, but also increasing the taxes on them. But that's not ever going to happen. But it'd be nice. The authors who are leading subsidies experts say a significant portion of the $1.8 trillion could be repurposed to support policies that are beneficial for nature and transition to net zero amid growing political division about the cost of decarbonizing the global economy. So we read that one article which said having the world switch to sustainable energy would cost $62 trillion, and we'd make that money back in just 11 years. So we know that we can pay for it, we can do it, and we'll get the money back in 11 years, and might even have a chance of saving humanity from extinction if we did that. But again, the U.S. military-industrial complex can't have that because wars over fossil fuels is a primary driver for military expenditures. Fossil fuel industry won't want to do it. The car industry isn't going to want to do it either because it'll end fossil fuels. And of course, the agri-corp people aren't going to want to do that either because that's where their money is. The report calls for governments to agree a target to eradicate environmentally harmful subsidies by the end of the decade at the Biodiversity COP gathering in China later this year, where it is hoped a Paris Agreement for nature will be signed and for companies to reveal the subsidies they receive as a part of environmental disclosure reporting. Christiana Figueres, who is the head of the UN Climate Change Convention when the Paris Agreement was signed, welcomed the research. She said these subsidies were creating huge risks for the businesses receiving them. Nature is declining at an alarming rate, and we have never lived on a planet with so little biodiversity, she said. Harmful subsidies must be redirected towards protecting the climate and nature rather than financing our own extinction. I like the way they're framing this. This is really, really, really well framed. Financing our own extinction. That's powerful. The fossil fuel industry, $62 billion. The agricultural sector, $520 billion. Water, $320 billion. And forestry, $155 billion, account for the majority of the $1.8 trillion, according to the report. No estimate for mining, believed to cause billions of dollars of damage to ecosystems every year, could be derived. Lack of transparency between governments and recipients means the true figure is likely to be much higher, as is the implicit cost of harmful subsidies. Last year, an International Monetary Fund report found the fossil fuel industry benefited from subsidies worth $5.9 trillion in 2020, but the vast majority of this figure comes from the hidden costs of failing to make polluters pay for the deaths they cause and global heating. Right, so as we've said before, that if, there was a study done, which I need to find somewhere. If someone knows where the study is, please, I'll throw that in the chat there, that if fossil fuel industry businesses had to pay for the negative externalities for climate change, for the deaths and the cancers they cause, then none of them would ever be profitable. And that's exactly the problem we have here. We're not holding them accountable for the true cost of them doing business. So the profits are privatized, and the costs, the negative costs for negative externalities, climate change, cancer, deaths, and stuff from them to do business is socialized. We pay for it. Subsidy reform allows us to improve the price signals so that we are not protecting income in more polluting industries, said Doug Kaplow, founder of the organization EarthTrack, which monitors environmentally harmful subsidies and co-author of the report, along with Donald Steenblick, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development's former special counselor for fossil fuel subsidy reform. It creates space for alternative and cleaner forms of energy to enter the marketplace. Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's how my policies approach it. I say stop all the subsidies to the harmful things, increase the taxes on the harmful things. That's what economies for common good would do. We cut the military budget by 75%, and we shift all of that into sustainable energy, specifically tidal, wave, and this is three or four types of ocean, right? Tidal, stream, wave, and whatever else is there for that, and then also into geothermal, especially the ultra deep geothermal technology, which has just come out, or which is just being researched currently, and then also getting into like high altitude solar satellites, power satellites, in high altitude wind as the part of the base load sustainable energy market. And beyond that, then you can get into kind of intermittent stuff. Then you can get into solar and wind as, having batteries there to support the grid in case it's needed. And it's needed to go this way because batteries are a very significant expense. If we have powerful base load power, ocean, tidal, wave, stream, right? In geothermal, in power satellites, in high altitude wind turbines as our baseload power, then we don't need as many batteries, and that greatly decreases the effective cost of sustainable energy when they're baseload power, because we don't need batteries, because we need batteries for solar and wind, because they're intermittent. Okay, and if you want to look at that, my policies, I talk about all that stuff in here. Learn about that, things we can do in here in my policies. All right. Yeah, and the thing with geothermal hasn't really expanded very much because it's super expensive to drill the hole and to see if we can get to an area where geothermal will work. And part of that is they're limited to the depth they can dig, but once they get ultra deep geothermal dealt with and the technology approved, that means we can do geothermal pretty much anywhere, and that will radically open how well we can do sustainable energy. But yeah, so one way we could get that to geothermal plants to expand is for the U.S. government to subsidize the drilling of the initial holes, because that's the most expensive part of it. If the government will subsidize that, then geothermal can really do a lot of expanding, because that's one of the most expensive parts of that whole process. A draft target in the UN Biodiversity Agreement for this decade calls for $500 billion a year in subsidies to be reformed, but the B Team and Business for Nature, which support the research, have said this must be strengthened. The world has never met a target on halting biodiversity loss, and the failure to act on subsidies was highlighted as a major issue from last decade's targets. Eva Zabi, Executive Director of Business for Nature, said businesses were often unaware of the extent of explicit and implicit subsidies they benefit from, but could use their influence to call for change. Many businesses are benefiting from these environmentally harmful subsidies. This cannot be a taboo topic. We need to speak using facts and understand where the financial flows are going, she said. Typically, the subsidies were established with good intentions in mind. We need to level the playing field, because right now some are benefiting from a head start when it should be the other way around. It's a wicked problem. So yeah, there's the quote, right? It's hard to get someone to understand something when their paycheck depends upon it. And much of this stuff, it's hard to get subsidies to be reformed when the people who shouldn't be getting them are getting them. And when the people who are in charge of the governments are more than happy to give the subsidies to these organizations who are killing the world, they own and control the government. Last year, a UN report found almost 90% of subsidies given to farmers every year are harmful, damaging people's health, fueling the climate crisis, destroying nature, and driving inequality by excluding smallholder farmers. Now, and I do talk about this, and this is in my policies as well, that farming policies should do this. They should basically, the government, or at least the federal government, give money to the communities. The communities can purchase the local farmland, and then they'll take 10% of it and turn it to vertical farms of many levels of vertical farmings, 10-story vertical farms. Take 10% of the land, turn it to multi-story vertical farms, and then you're creating even more food year-round. Instead of just having, here in the United States, one growing season for 3 or 4 months, you have all 12 months of food. And it's also much more resilient to climate change, which is a big fucking deal, because temperatures are rising, droughts are happening, and we're losing our food source. And any government that does not do this is basically voting for their people to die due to malnutrition and starvation. I mean, that's just the way it is. So all the governments in the world need to be doing this right now. Buying up the farmland, taking 10% of that land and shifting it to multi-story vertical farms, and then the rest of that land can be turned into can be rewilded, planted with local flowers and trees and stuff like that. And that green space will help climate change, help reduce the temperatures, help to make everything, the climate better. Although it takes about 20 years for a forest to be carbon negative, for a tree to be carbon negative. That's carbon positive until then. So kind of one of those things. All right. Elizabeth Mrema, the UN's biodiversity head, said the report was critically important. The report highlights how redirecting, repurposing, or eliminating subsidies could make an important contribution to unlocking the $711 billion required each year to halt and reverse the loss of nature by 2030, as well as the cost of reaching net zero emissions, she said. Right, and again, this is one thing the U.S. government could fund, right? Green New Deal, it's a part of that. Gutting the U.S. military down to 75%, shifting subsidies away from the fossil fuel industry, away from corporate farming that are, that's destroying the environment, shifting it to multi-story vertical farms and rewilding places, and then also setting up, the federal jobs guarantee, like a national, I don't know what Biden actually talked about this a while ago, a citizen conservation corps, so that they work on climate change stuff, or, rewilding the farmlands, doing conservation work all over the country. I mean, we could do it right now. We could have done this 10 years ago. We could have been doing this just a long time. But there's no money in that. Okay. Questions, comments, or suggestions? Anything? Super quiet today. Anything? Make sure people are awake here. You guys there? Yeah. So this past month or so, 5 weeks, 6 weeks, I've been eating nothing but garbage, like almost every day. Mountain Dew, Reese's peanut butter cups, right? So I found one. I just remembered there's a way I can deal with this. I'm gonna buy. I'll go ahead and show you this. Focus Aid. Yeah, here we go. Focus Aid. It's a nootropic drink. I was buying this before. Yeah, I'll be buying it like this. Oh. Melon Mate? Ugh. I don't know what flavor I bought. Oh my god. I think it's this one. This is really expensive though. Free from artificial sweeteners, colorings, and flavorings. Natural caffeine from green tea leaf. Extract and yerba mate. Oh, here it is. Focus. Okay. So nootropics, alpha GPC, yerba mate, green tea, American ginseng, acetyl L-carnitine, GABA, folic acid, Rhodolia rosea, full vitamin B complex, vitamin C and D. That's what is in this. So I'm gonna buying this and drinking this instead of doing all that garbage in the morning. It's better than, you know, having all that garbage in the morning. I really need something in the morning that I think, at least on some level, is going to help wake me up a little bit. I'm still not sleeping well. So even, you know, that's supposed to be for focus and getting your brain started, which is good. And even if it's as a placebo, it keeps me from doing this other stuff. So I just remembered that today or yesterday, and I'm like, oh, fuck, I should have been doing that the whole time. So I went and I purchased that, and I'll keep doing that, and that'll keep me off the other garbage. And then hopefully I can get back into doing my paleo autoimmune protocol diet. Okay, here we go. This is an opinion piece by Robert Reich. When is this from? This is fairly recent, right? 25th of September, so about 2 weeks. Corporate greed, not wages, is behind inflation. It's time for price controls. Yeah, so we were talking about this, right? The inflation is crisis profiteering. It's not because there's inflation for reasons. It's because, well, there is a reason. It's called corporate greed, and that's pretty much it. Corporations are using rising costs as an excuse to increase their prices even higher, resulting in record profits. We need limited price controls to break the cycle. Yeah, I agree. If there is record inflation and record profits, then record profits are the inflation. And you can't, if you're going to talk about inflation, you better talk about corporate profits. Because if that business is not basically breaking even, then, or even taking a negative, then they are the ones who are the problem. On Wednesday, policymakers at the Federal Reserve, America's central bank, continued their battle against inflation with a third straight supersized interest rate increase. And they warned that they're not done. They'll continue to raise borrowing costs until inflation is tamed. If you want to raise inflation, if you want to control inflation, increase taxes on the rich. Increase taxes on companies that have shitloads of money. They assume that the underlying economic problem is a tight labor market causing wages to rise. No. And prices to rise in response. No. And they believe interest rate increases are necessary to slow wage price inflation. No, this doesn't work together. So I think there's been plenty of studies that show that if minimum wage increases, don't increase prices. If they do, it's a marginal amount. It's a small amount. It's not like the doubling or tripling of costs that we've seen here recently. That it's purely crisis profiteering. It's not because of wages. It's not because of the labor market. It's because of crisis profiteering. Full stop. This is dead wrong. Okay, good. Wage increases have not even kept up with inflation. True statement. Most workers' paychecks are shrinking in terms of real purchasing power rather than causing inflation. Wages are actually reducing inflationary pressures. True statement. The underlying economic problem is a profit price inflation. It's caused by corporations raising their prices above their increasing costs. Corporations are using those increasing costs of materials, components, and labor as excuses to increase their prices even higher, resulting in bigger profits. And this is why corporate profits are close to levels not seen in over half a century. Yep, corporations have the power to raise prices without losing customers because they face so little competition. Since the 1980s, 2/3 of all American industries have become more concentrated. What are grocery prices? Why are grocery prices through the roof? Because just 4 companies control 85% of meat and poultry processing. Just one corporation sets the price for most of the nation's seed corn, and 2 giant firms dominate consumer staples. All are raising prices and increasing profits because they can. Big Pharma, comprising 5 giants, is causing drug prices to soar. The airline industry has gone from 12 carriers in 1980 to just 4 today, all rapidly raising ticket prices. Wall Street has consolidated into 5 giant banks, raking in record profits on the spreads between the interest they pay on deposits and what they charge on loans. Wall Street is always making bank. Broadband is dominated by 3 giant cable companies, all raising their prices. Automobile dealers are enjoying record profits as they raise the retail prices of automobiles. Gas prices have started to drop, but Big Oil still has the power to raise prices at the pump far higher than the cost of crude, and so on. This is why Congress and the administration need to take direct action against profit price inflation, rather than rely solely on the Fed to raise interest rates and put the burden of fighting inflation on average working people who are not responsible for it. Bold antitrust enforcement is essential. Even the credible threat of antitrust enforcement can deter corporations from raising prices higher than their costs. I don't always agree with Robert Reich because he's a capitalist and he, part of the Clinton regime, but he's got some good thoughts here, which is good to see. A windfall profits tax could also be helpful. This would be a temporary tax on price increases exceeding the producer price index's costs of producing consumer goods. Price control should be a backstop. The current inflation emerging from the pandemic is analogous to the inflation after the Second World War, when economists advocated temporary price controls to buy time to overcome supply bottlenecks and to prevent corporate profiteering. Okay, so what would probably be more effective is, say, if your prices have gone over what your prices are from 2019, since before the pandemic started, I don't know, you get a huge tax, like a 20% tax increase on your, CEO and your upper management, as well as the businesses too. Well, with that, okay, you're gonna have to do price regulation as well, or I don't know, something like that. Price regulation plus an increased tax for those who are abusing the thing. I think there's a move for billionaires to have a tax equal to the amount of money that they've made since the pandemic has started. I very much support that as well, because Bezos and Musk and Gates have made shitloads of money. Zuckerberg, since the pandemic has started, so they're making just massive amounts of money because the government is throwing money to the millionaires and billionaires, and not to us pathetic peasants who have no actual power or influence in the government. Okay, price control should be a backstop. The current inflation emerging from the pandemic, that is not a thing. We're still in the fucking pandemic, you fucking tool. Is analogous to the inflation after the second. Okay, we just read that. When economists advocated temporary price controls to buy time to overcome supply bottlenecks and prevent corporate profiteering. Limited price controls should be considered now for the same reasons. The inflation we are experiencing is not due to wage gains from the excessive worker power. It is due to profit gains from excessive corporate power. It's not profits, it's profits, not wages that need to be controlled. True statement. True statement. There we go. Questions, comments, suggestions on this? I am going too fast through this stuff. I don't have that much left. Anybody have anything? Nobody's actually here. Well, let me check here. There should be a. Oh my god, what have I done? All right. Next one. I don't think we've read this yet. Maybe we have, maybe we haven't, but we'll go through it again. Because we're here and we have the time. Questions, comments, suggestions? Anything? You guys still there? All right. This is from Futurism. What's this from? Give me a date. This is pretty small. I don't have a date here. But Chinese company launching solar panels to space where they'll beam energy down to Earth. Now this is something that we've talked about on the stream before, called power satellites. There's a whole video on this from Science and Futurism with Isaac Arthur. Let's go ahead and pull that up so we can see it. Or no, actually, yeah, there is one, and it's in our environmental policies. Let's take a look at that. Power satellites. Here we go. Upward bound power satellites. This is from Science and Futurism with Isaac Arthur. It is an amazing series. If you haven't followed SFIA, please, dear God, do, because they are awesome. So the concept here is you've got solar panels here. It'll be on this side out here, and the side you can't see. That doesn't make sense. Why is this facing away? Okay, well, whichever side is facing the sun will be a bunch of solar panels. Then they'll use microwaves to beam it back down to Earth. Okay, beam me down. A leading Chinese solar power company says it's sending panels to orbit in an effort to establish a 24/7 operation, harvesting the bright solar energy up there and beaming it back to Earth. As Bloomberg reports, the Xi'an-based Longi Green Energy Technology Company's proposal is garnering interest because it is deceptively simple value prospect that it can harness solar power all day and not just while the sun is out. While Longi is far from the first to explore the possibility of space-bound solar panels, Bloomberg notes that Caltech got a grant to study space solar panels back in 2013, and that India, Japan, and Russia are also working on similar efforts. This Chinese company appears to be the furthest along in making the tech a reality. Okay, did I? Is that? Okay, so I haven't. I swear we've read this, but I haven't added it to here yet. Sorry, I swear to God, I put it here. Okay, so I haven't yet. All right. Public partnership. I think I may have read this myself, but not have read it here on stream yet. China is also home to the first reportedly successful space solar panel transmission model, after researchers in Zhejiang University captured sunlight high above the ground, converted it to microwave beams, and delivered it to a reception station on the ground that turned the energy into electricity, the report notes. You know what? Since we have so much time, we are going to watch that video. How about that? Let's watch that video. It's going to be half an hour. We've got time. Let's do it.
The universe.
We'll watch it here after we get done reading this. Okay, how's that sound? If you don't want to do it, we're going to go on to the next article, which is New Way of Life, the Marxist Post-Capitalist Green Manifesto, how UK targeted American civil rights leader. Yeah, we've got that going. So let me know, and then we'll go from there. Converted it into microwave beams and delivered it to a reception station on the ground that turned the energy into electricity, the report notes. I think the efficiency of this, of the energy, so not the total efficiency, like solar panels are what, 22% efficient, so it's not taking into account that efficiency, because that has whatever efficiency that it has, right? 22%, 24% if you're really good. But so that energy that's taken from the solar panels and then sent down to the ground using microwaves, I think it's like 80% efficient, 90% efficient in the beaming. Along with the exciting prospects itself is the potential for private-public partnership. According to Bloomberg, Wu Zhijian, the president of the government-funded China Space Foundation, said that Longi's creation of a space solar panel lab could lead to renewable energy partnerships with the China National Space Association. Right, and this is another one of those base load power things that we can use, although my big concern for this is that the effect that microwaves have going through the environment. I'm concerned about that effect. But there it is. If successful, huge. If the concept could be revolutionary, right? And I think that, again, China is way ahead of us in just about everything. And I think they're going to leapfrog over us when it comes to this, and this will become a staple of their energy supply. And this will be huge. This will be huge if they can get this done and tested and everything, and then just much like I talk about. So like right here, see, let's do so right here, Climate change: launch a swarm of microsatellites over the poles to provide shade, block infrared, for the poles to cool it down and reduce the effects of global warming and to help restore environmental equilibrium. They can also store solar power as well as contain sensors and send data to the surface and micro cameras and so on and so forth. So as a way of helping to deal with climate change, we could put these power satellites over the poles to shield it from the the solar from the sunlight, and if you shade it from that, then the North Pole has a chance to cool down. The Arctic has a chance to cool down. You kind of get a 2-for-1 out of this deal. All right, so we are going. I wish I could maximize this. I really do. How can I? Hold on. Let me see if I can adjust this. Hello. Browser. All right, so we'll just listen to this. Did I?
Provides so much.
Oh, you can't even see it. Why can't you see it? What just happened? Oh, I switched off it. Oh my god. Okay, so I'll stop talking. You can't see it down here. Damn it. Give that chance. Alright, I'll stop talking and then we'll play this and we'll watch this. It's about 30 minutes, so I'll get us through some more of our time here today. This is Science and Futurism with Isaac Arthur. Kind of see that here. That's not working. No, it's not working. No. Hold on. Okay, and it's Upward Bound Power Satellites. I put the link to it in there so you can take a look at it. All right, here we go.
Power, yet we struggle to tap it and crave more. Instead of being powerless, let's get off Earth and conquer space. So today we continue the Upward Bound series, and I'll look at how to get into space cheaper and easier, and what we can do up there once we can place stuff in orbit more cheaply. Of course, if you're up in space for a while, you'll need a reliable power supply, and that generally means either solar or atomic. In terms of the latter, fusion is a good option if we can ever get it working, but fission is not something folks want in orbit overhead in large quantities. The big weakness of ground-based solar are that it's useless on cloudy days and at night, but this is an area where being in space is actually a major advantage. When we refer to the dark void of space, we're being more poetic than accurate. Space near Earth is constantly lit brighter than the noontime sun, and indeed you have to get out beyond the asteroid belt before solar stops being as effective there as it is on most of Earth. The equivalent of darkness in space depends on your distance from the sun, or if something's in between you and the sun, placing you in the object's shadow. While any object in a classic low Earth orbit is spending a lot of its time in the relatively large shadow of the planet, as you get further away, less of your orbital path is in that shadow. Additionally, various non-circular orbits, or locations like the Lagrange points, have little to no time in shadow, eliminating most or all of the downtime experienced by solar panels situated on the Earth. As for wearing down over time, solar panels on Earth have to contend with dust, rain, snow, sandstorms, thermal fluctuations, and other weathering, none of which are present in the vacuum of space, and, needless to say, there are no clouds there either. The total benefit is about 7 times more kilowatt hours per year from a given photovoltaic solar panel. Perpetual lighting also eliminates most of the need for batteries, all of which makes solar an excellent choice for space. It's much more attractive than on Earth, and of course we're interested in getting that energy to Earth, whether beamed down or otherwise, and eventually to other places in space. The idea has been looked at a lot for decades, but is becoming increasingly feasible now that launch costs are plummeting. For this to be practical though, we have to overcome certain issues, and we should start by laying those out. First and foremost, getting stuff into space is expensive. Doing that cheaper is, after all, what this series is mostly about. A solar panel in space might be several times more effective than one on Earth, but if you need to spend hundreds of times more money to get that panel up there, while it remains useful for powering things up there, it wouldn't really make sense to beam it down. Not when you can far more easily deploy and maintain conveniently sized arrays of panels down here. But down here, you have to add energy storage, which is several times more expensive than PV panels, if you want to compare apples to apples. Second, there is the question of how you beam that energy down, and this comes with a lot of problems. For instance, if you're beaming down with a visible light laser, it still has to go through all that air and clouds. There is also an additional effect called thermal blooming that causes laser light to be absorbed by the atmosphere over any significant distance, at least for frequencies that interact with the atmosphere. You also lose energy at every stage of the process, as you convert sunlight to electricity, then into lasers, then down to Earth through the atmosphere, into a collector there, and back into electricity again. We'll be looking at these problems, some solutions, and some alternatives to visible light today in greater detail. But that brings up a third issue, which is safety. A big giant laser is also known as a death ray, and with any power beaming system, you are directing a lot of energy into a potentially small place. This is a serious problem if your beam goes off target from the collector and over to a city, be that as a result of an accident or deliberate action. So we'll be looking at ways you'd be trying to make one safe to use. It is also worth remembering though that a giant laser in space also has some handy uses, like blowing up incoming asteroids or space junk. Not to mention, it's a great way to push spaceships up to high speeds. So we will also be discussing some of the non-terrestrial uses of power satellites later on, though our main focus is getting energy to Earth. At this point, we have to start considering scale. At present, humanity uses energy from all sources combined at an average power rate of about 18 terawatts, 18 million megawatts, not including the solar energy used by photosynthesis and evaporation. That's about 2,400 watts per person, day in, day out, every day. And while we are getting a lot more efficient with power usage, we also have a lot of people in developing regions who don't use much yet, and hopefully will in the future. Hopefully not too much or too soon though, because our main method of power generation has concerns about heating up the planet. We should start with a note there then, as folks often worry about power satellites heating the planet by adding more energy, which of course they do. The thing is, it isn't our direct use of energy that's heating the planet. While we use energy at an 18 terawatt rate, Earth receives about 10,000 times that energy from sunlight. The extra heat we add would be trivial on its own. The concern is with the greenhouse gases being released and trapping an additional fraction of the solar energy, not the extra energy we consume directly. However, power satellites are solar powered, so were that a concern, you could just have them block incoming light to Earth, cutting down on how much reaches us. Not that you'd bother, since you could easily use a mirror to do the job, which is cheaper, thinner, and a lot less complex for such a geoengineering purpose. 18 terawatts is a huge amount of power, and even our most efficient experimental solar panels, though still being worked on in a lab, would only get you about 600 watts per square meter in orbit. To get up to 18 terawatts, you'd need 30,000 square kilometers of our best panels, or a single panel 100 kilometers in radius. That wouldn't include any losses in transmission either. Fortunately, we can assume high-efficiency panels are used, as the single biggest cost to deploying a power satellite is launch cost, which we'll discuss in a moment. solar panels will continue to get lighter, cheaper, more durable, and more efficient as time goes on. But for the moment, if we use our top-end figures for performance, we can do a panel with thickness as low as 2 millimeters, massing only about 2 kilograms a square meter, and generating about 600 watts per kilogram in space, constantly. To get 18 trillion watts out of 600 watts per square meter would require 30 billion square meters, or 30,000 square kilometers, at an approximate mass of 60 billion kilograms. At current launch costs, that could run nearly $100 trillion, and doesn't include any losses in transmission or other associated equipment. However, these would likely have a lifetime of 20 to 30 years, and since the energy sector is several $1 trillion a year, with estimated figures varying widely, spread out over 20 to 30 years, this would already be approaching a competitive cost. As manufacturing continues to improve and launch costs drop, this could get us into the economically feasible zone for power satellites rather quickly, and now would seem a good time to start prototyping to see if this can be made viable as launch costs drop. However, this is SFIA, so we are less interested in the next decade than the next century, and the earlier episodes of this series discuss mini launch systems that we already have the tech for that can drop launch costs to 1/10 or even 100th of what SpaceX's Falcon Heavy can do. As a reminder, stuff like Jim Powell's Startram, or Keith Lofstrom's Launch Loop, or Paul Birch's Orbital Ring are not all that high tech. They just have a big upfront cost, many billions of dollars, which only looks big since we don't actually spend our relatively small space budget on launching truly massive things. Our annual ground-to-space launch volumes are tiny compared to a single day's traffic through any major airport, and same as you don't build an international airport next to a small village, you don't build these kind of launch systems till you are ready to up your game and launch a lot more, not because they are particularly high-tech. When you're thinking about replacing a multi-trillion-dollar sector of the economy, options like those launch alternatives suddenly become much more attractive and profitable. See those episodes for details. But even the most expensive of them are offering launch costs smaller than the production cost of the power satellites. It's also worth noting that much of their operational cost is electricity, which needless to say is altered when you're launching gigawatt-sized power generators into orbit. Additionally, most of the weight of a panel is still silicon, the second most abundant element on the moon's surface, right after oxygen. Nor are solar panels incredibly tricky to produce, especially when mass and efficiency isn't much of an issue, and the moon is close enough for us to do remote operations, so any factories there do not need much personnel physically present to operate, or sophisticated artificial intelligence. Before we move on, I should also note that photovoltaics, turning photons into electricity the way a solar panel does, is not the only way to turn light into electricity. We could, for instance, just concentrate light on a liquid in pipes so it heats up, boils, and turns a turbine, a thermal power sat, like the prize-winning FlowerSat design. This is a viable way of generating power, provided the light is sufficiently intense, and sunlight can be made incredibly intense. Thermal methods are how most power generation occurs, using an atomic or chemical fuel source for heat instead of sunlight. If you can't make cheaper solar panels, you can always use a bunch of thin, parabolic mirrors and non-imaging light funnels to focus light on some substance to heat it and drive a fairly standard heat engine. Getting rid of waste heat during the cycle is harder when you can only remove heat from a system in space by radiating it, but you can still use cooling by conduction and forced convection inside it. The backside of all those mirrors can also be used for radiating surfaces too. Even surfaces exposed to sunlight can potentially be used to radiate waste heat by use of wavelength selective surfaces. Okay, so we can collect it up there, but how do we get it down? The traditionally suggested method is microwaves in a beam, which worries folks a bit since we also use those to heat up our food. They'll heat up a person or a city just as well. We'll get to the safety issues in a bit. First, why microwaves? They are not the only option. but in terms of our spectrum, the atmosphere does a very good job keeping out virtually all gamma and X-ray radiation, and the overwhelming majority of ultraviolet too, so they're not great wavelengths to use to get our energy past the atmosphere. Visible light goes through pretty well, obviously, but much is still lost even in an open sky, and clouds obviously are murderous on visible light transmission. Don't discard it just from that, though. Power satellites all around the planet can just retarget their beams to collectors not obscured by the clouds, and only on the cloudiest days will we not have clear sky windows which some power sats could use to get an angle on the ground-based collectors. I should also note that we always want other power generation methods and energy storage in any power grid anyway, so that some ground-based collectors being blocked by clouds sometimes is not really a deal-breaker for visible light. Nor do you necessarily need to beam light down as a laser. A big parabolic dish concentrating light on ground-based collectors is an option too, which gets around thermal blooming that happens when a high-powered laser enters a medium, like air, that's absorbing some of it and heating up and scattering the beam a lot. This, by the way, is a really big issue for using ground-based lasers to intercept missiles, or using lasers for ultra-high bandwidth data transmission over long distances. Since part of the point is to get power down at night, using the visible range of the spectrum in broad diffuse beams could cause a lot of light pollution, though in some places this might be advantageous. Of all the spectrum, radio waves are the ones that basically ignore the atmosphere and clouds the most overall, and microwaves, which are shorter than radio waves in wavelength, which is where the name micro comes from, are quite good at going through our atmosphere, clouds or not. You might wonder about the danger of this, but if you are accessing this episode over a wireless network, I should note that those use microwaves too, and the same frequency as your microwave oven. There's nothing very special about that frequency, by the way. It's just in a small band that the FCC leaves free for non-broadcast purposes. Equipment operating at these frequencies is also pretty efficient at converting between electricity and microwaves, especially compared to lasers. You can do better than 75% with a magnetron converting electricity into microwaves, whereas laser efficiency, as much as it's improved, is still generally more like 50%. Our best new laser designs can almost match that, but historically, lasers have been much less efficient. Microwaves remain better, but not by the same overwhelming margin. Here's the thing though, a rectenna, a specialized type of antenna for absorbing these microwaves and turning them back into electricity, has an efficiency of at least 85%, much better than our best solar panels. This means that any side effect environmental heating from beamed-in microwaves will be much less as well. Now, as to safety concerns, the general notion is to beam the energy in at about 100 watts per square meter, non-coincidentally what OSHA says is the maximum safe workplace exposure amount. To get 18 terawatts, and keeping in mind 15% is lost in conversion by rectennas, would require about 200,000 square kilometers of rectenna collector surface area. Sounds big, and indeed it is. That's about the size of Nebraska. Not that you'd be putting them all in the same place. More to the point, that doesn't really seem much better than covering huge chunks of land with solar panels. Of course, you could just increase power density and fence the plate off, but you'd still be blowing birds away left and right and potentially have a doomsday weapon. Though, realistically, you could ramp the beam intensity up an order of magnitude without producing too much of either problem. Birds would tend to avoid them as uncomfortable or be able to swoop through before being hurt. This is mostly just raw heat damage, like being too near your fireplace after all. However, the neat thing about a rectenna is that you can use multiple of them to cover a wide area, and this area is not entirely lost to you, as a rectenna is a mesh more like chicken wire than an opaque glass panel, and tougher too. Indeed, you could beam it right down on a city and provide wireless power, though obviously you'd want to be careful about concentrating it too much. Incorporating solar panels into roads and parking lots obviously has extreme issues with durability, while sticking a layer of chicken wire over farm fields or grazing land isn't difficult, nor is it that hard to concentrate such beams to such sizes and keep them on target. nor will they torch a fiery furrow through the landscape as they go. But the optical considerations of microwaves means that rectennas receiving gigawatts will necessarily be large, usually several kilometers across. Safety is easily achieved by having the emitter and collector handshake, and the beam just shuts off if it goes off target. I should probably note that an optical version of this, using nanotech and metamaterials, called the Nantenna, shows promise of achieving a 70% or higher conversion of optical light frequencies to electricity. The impact of this emerging technology on solar panels, ground or space-based,
hello. Honey Marici, что за жуинью смотришь? Я не понимаю. Я немного говорю по-русски. I speak just a little bit of Russian. Enough to know when people are talking about me. How are you today? We're watching a video on power satellites. Thank you. Thank you. Learned a little bit from my wife. My wife's from Belarus. I've been there a few times. Been to Moscow once as well. Yeah, power satellites. This is an amazing video. This is Science and Futurism with Isaac Arthur. It's an amazing channel. No. So we're just kind of watching this. I got through most of my stuff earlier in the Oh, thank you so much for the follow. I appreciate that. There we go. Thank you so much. Thank you. That's pretty loud. Yeah, I cover the 3 C's: capitalism, climate change, and coronavirus stuff, though we haven't done much coronavirus stuff. We do a lot of sustainable tech stuff, much like we're talking about here. I read this one article here with a Chinese company specifically looking at creating power satellites like this. So that's why we're watching this video. This is in my policies as well. I have my own policy site. This is my environmental policies, which does talk about sustainable energy using the various types of baseload power. Various types of sustainable energy for baseload power, such as tidal, ocean, tidal, stream, wave, and geothermal. And then another option would be power satellites or high-altitude wind turbines as well. And this video is kind of going over the power satellites aspect. It's a really good video. And we'll also probably go over, depending on the time, I think last week we watched the video on tethered rings, which is also by Science and Futurism with Isaac Arthur. It is another way of kind of an intermediate state where we can get stuff into space. It's kind of that step before we go into the massive orbital rings. An orbital ring, which is something that we have the technology to do today. We could have been doing this for a decade. You know, the tethered loop, which I just found out about, in the orbital ring too. We have the technology, the materials to do that too. It'd be a much easier way to get stuff into, much more sustainable way to get stuff into space than blowing, shitloads of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere using rockets and stuff like that. So, yeah, that's what we're doing right now. We're a little over halfway done with this video. It's great. We're just talking about rectennas and nantennas using power satellites and solar panels or solar concentrators to collect sunlight in space using a satellite and then beaming it down using microwaves. So that's what we're doing right now. Any questions or comments before we continue? Okay, we'll keep going.
Might be immense and very near at hand. Again though, this is SFIA, In this series, it's only been a few episodes since we were talking about orbital rings, the great big rings around planets for getting into space once we want to be moving millions of people and megatons of cargo back and forth between space and the ground on a daily basis. An orbital ring is far cheaper, kilogram for kilogram, than any other options, and you can scale it up immensely if you want to, unlike rockets, where that kind of throughput would also produce enough pollution and heat to mess with your climate. If you want to do a lot of travel from ground to space, and you love your planet, you should put a ring on it. While the massive drop in launch cost is certainly handy, the orbital ring also brings some benefits from being directly connected to the planet below. You can run tethers and lines down to the surface, without making them of supermaterials like graphene, though you may still want to use graphene in particular, since recent improvements are being made in producing it in bulk, and it's quite a good conductor of electricity. But the important point is that tethers going from the ring to the planet need only be reasonably strong, not space elevator strong, and don't have to be rigid or run in straight lines. Because of this, they can be built with some extra features in mind, such as transmitting power, bringing people or cargo to and from the cities near the ring, and can do so without a lot of the hassle of something like a rocket. You can't launch a rocket anywhere near a city, or any sort of spaceship meant for that kind of speed and acceleration, not without damaging the city or even killing people, so you'd have to commute to a launch pad far from that city and any of its suburbs. Alternatively, an orbital ring tether can leave from any terminal in that city as easily as a train or subway, allowing direct transport of people from a city up to the ring. And for that matter, they can also transport up heat, something we might discuss more in the future. But this is interesting in the context of Ecumenopolises, planet-wide cities, or their little brothers or colleges, in that it means space-based power generation is actually better than fusion, because a fusion reactor is still producing a lot of waste heat in the process of making electricity. Power plants generally lose over half their energy to heat loss in making electricity, even before it hits the power grid, where even more is lost to the resistance on the lines. But a solar panel in space, running electricity right down a cable to a city, or for that matter a reactor in space doing the same, is not producing one extra drop of heat on Earth that isn't in the grid. So no heat is being produced due to electricity production waste, though of course all that electricity will end as heat, either in the wires or at your house. It's just not leaving half or more back at the power plant. Orbital rings are a major investment, and they also aren't local. You have to encircle the whole planet. We do have another option, which can be done strictly at one location, and that is to build Kármán space towers. I call them that because they reach the Kármán line, which is the generally accepted line between our atmosphere and space. Even with our material science today, we can build such a lightweight structure using carbon fiber materials. We might even squeak by without having to resort to newer construction techniques too. As many of you will be aware though, here at SFIA, we are very much in favor of using active support systems to build higher and stronger. See our episode on space towers, and particularly the Atlas Pillar, for how to do that. As a brief recap, we support the tower by using a series of fountains of material propelled through the tower. Our Kármán towers are lightweight Atlas pillars poking above the atmosphere with an energy collector at the top. Now the atmosphere does not abruptly end as you go into space. At the Kármán line, which is 100 kilometers up, the air density is about 2.2 million times less than at the surface. That's handy for power generation, as we'll see. Should you have trouble building quite that high, much of the advantage remains from going shorter, but taller is better. Atlas pillars take a lot of power to keep them supported. How much depends on your efficiency regenerating the momentum of the support material. In theory, that could be a 100% efficient, closed loop, but we're not there yet, and these would use a fair amount of power. You might ask, what is the point of having a Kármán tower that consumes some of the power it produces, when you could just beam the energy to the ground instead? The answer is the energy collector is in space. Having the collector in space handily gets around a lot of the transmission losses and other problems we discussed, like thermal blooming, light pollution, hazards to animals, and the trade-off of concentration for safety. You can skip a lot of these steps by just having big meals and parabolic dishes that can point at a large array of solar collectors fanned out on the top of that tower and flood the panels with as much light as they can handle, and those meals can bounce light to the night side collectors just fine, as well as filter out any frequencies we can't use well or which might degrade the panels. You stick one just north of a city so it never shadows it, and run a low resistance power line down it, and now that city has a good power supply and a popular tourism spot, since looking down from 100 kilometers up gives a breathtaking view of everything for 1,000 kilometers around.
Pretty cool.
It also has virtually no footprint on the ground, is very safe if there's a power loss, offers ultra-high efficiency power transfer, and provides direct access to space and a launch system. See the Space Towers episode for more on this. Another thing that having a direct connection between space and the ground gives us is an ability to deal with the heat produced at the converter. In space, the only way to get rid of the heat is to radiate it away, which requires giant radiators. It's also less efficient than using convection and conduction, which are cooling options only available on the ground. If we pipe the heat back to Earth, we can much more easily dissipate it. We can also use the heat as a source of power in its own right, or use it as a way of desalinating water with coastal Kármán towers. Come to think of it, I like the idea of a steampunk solution. We generate steam at the collector and use the steam pressure as part of the active support of the tower itself. We also tap it for energy using turbine generators and then pump the cooled fluid back up to the collector. The entire structure could be a giant steam engine converting the steam to electricity as we go.
Interesting.
Traditionally, you do this with magnets, launching material up a mass driver that's slowed down and deflected back by a receiver up top, but in theory, any flow of matter works. So power satellites seem a much more attractive option, and a potential gateway to space as launch costs drop. We've talked about many industries that might fuel a snowball effect to help us get into space: science, tourism, even filmmaking. But which of these can match energy? A market making up roughly 10% of our global economy, and the biggest bottleneck on greater prosperity for humanity in this modern era. Get power satellite operations down to even just near the price per kilowatt hour of other existing sources, and it not only could power our homes here on Earth, but our efforts to make homes off Earth. And certainly the power demands to manufacture space habitats will be much higher than that sized for the habitat's ongoing domestic consumption. So even if power generation was the first piece of infrastructure built, additional power could be beamed to construction projects as needed, or even as emergency power later. Indeed, temporary beamed power for space projects, such as mining and construction, could be a major space industry in itself. And its applications aren't just for Earth and near Earth, as we'll see next week when we continue our discussion of generation ships to colonize distant stars. One of the hardest parts about traveling in deep space is getting up the speeds necessary to do it on reasonable timelines, and to provide power to those ships far from the sun, but still needing to keep warm and lit for those who dwell inside. You can beam power out quite a long way, and you can use it to help ships get up to speed. Of course, slowing down is another matter, and one we'll discuss next week in Exodus Fleet. Electricity is the life's blood of all our science and industry here on Earth, and will be for those ships too. And fundamentally, as launch costs drop and solar panel efficiency rises, power satellites can offer us a virtually unlimited supply of electricity without the ecological problems or supply bottlenecks of our current energy options. We had to gloss over a lot of the discussion of the basics of electromagnetism, induction, current, heat engines, and other core topics that explain how power generation and transmission is actually done, and why some of those methods we looked at today are better than others. If you'd like to learn more about those topics, or just brush up on them, then I'd recommend the Regents Physics Reviews. Those courses step through basic physics and some more advanced material in a detailed and professional fashion, never skipping over terms by assuming folks already know them, but also not dumbing things down either. Those are available over at Skillshare, an online learning community that focuses on assembling classes on technology and has courses on everything from basic sciences to a lot of modern software, and I've been using a lot of their classes on video production, audio engineering, and animations to improve the content here on the channel. If you want to improve your skills, unlock new premium join, just go to .sa class. As mentioned, next week we'll be returning to our topic of generation ships.
Okay, so there's that one, and let's I'm gonna bring up the tethered loop. Is that in here? Yes. Energy sustain. Okay. It's not in here. It's over here. We'll go ahead and watch that one since we have plenty of time today, and it's really interesting. Tethered ring. That's what it's called.
By wind and gravity.
Alright, this will help tear down our time here. This will take us to just after 5, so if you have a moment you want to watch this, this is really good stuff. So with the Power Satellite, it is super useful because you could, if you have the Power Satellite up there, you can send energy to the moon, to bases on the moon. You can send it to space stations. You can send it out to like Mars to help give them energy to do their thing. And also, if your satellite is configured properly, you can use it for a stellaser as well. A stellar laser, a way to push vehicles in space using a stellar laser as a part of a laser highway. Those two technologies probably aren't compatible, but we could add that sort of functionality onto the power satellite so that it can act additionally as a stellar laser as well to help push and give more acceleration to vehicles within the solar system or even outside the solar system if we went big enough. So power satellites are really great. Tethered ring space launchers is kind of that step before we get to orbital loops. We still, like Arthur said, we have what it takes to build orbital loops now, but kind of that step before is a tethered ring. And I watched this came out a month ago, and we just watched this last week because I'm so behind on the videos that I'm watching. So we'll watch this again. Curly Bear, how you doing? Welcome. Happy Saturday. It's a real quiet Saturday here. Going over some of the nuclear talk, the saber rattling, some power satellite stuff, lots of stuff. It's been really quiet here. So we're watching, I think this is the video we watched. I'm good. I started writing again. I kind of mentioned that last week. I'm still working on that. And if you look for scarcity on Discord, you have a link to that infographic and a link to the new Google Doc of what I'm writing. I'm at like 47 pages or something like that, and I'm kind of just getting started into it. So that's good. I'm really happy about that. At work, I've spent the last several months putting together an intranet site for accessibility. So that was soft released yesterday, which is awesome, and we'll hard release it on Monday. So everyone within the university will have access to training and knowledge and information on accessibility next week, which is awesome. We're super happy about that. Super happy. It's finally out there for people to use. The wife is sick this weekend. She had like a fever like a day or so ago, but she's really congested today, but she's feeling a lot better. A lot better. Not much else is going on, really. Doing good, doing stuff. Still here, watching videos. Yeah, she's doing okay. She's just congested right now, but she taught class today at least. She skipped, I think, yesterday and the day before of classes because she wasn't feeling well, but she's back today. She did take at least one test for COVID, and she came back negative. Not that I overly trust one test. Should take more than one, but she should be okay. She's recovering. Yeah. Oh yeah, we do. We have both in person and virtual. We've had that for quite a while. She did in person today and the virtual as well. Yeah, I was kind of thinking of recommending that too. Yeah, until she feels better. Yeah, I didn't even think about that actually. Going to just virtual and for a week or so, at least another few days until so she's feeling a lot better before going back. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, and that would be also an argument I wouldn't win because, well, yeah, we won't get into the family politics of it. Yeah, so she's doing better, so that's good. Right. Yeah, that's it. Writing, wife is sick, website, and we're watching right now Tethered Ring Space Launchers by Science and Futurism with Isaac Arthur, which is awesome. It's something we could do today to make it easier to launch things in space. We need to do it. I'll go and share the here, I'll share this for you. Went over this, which is a Chinese company going to do power satellite. Daughter's flying. Yeah, I spent almost my whole time here in the office, upstairs in the attic where it's quiet. The wife is going to be on a vacation in Atlanta, Georgia, visiting a friend for the next week, so I'll be taking care of the daughter. She goes to school, and then she goes to Boys and Girls Club, which is kind of an after-school thing where kids can go. So she does that till 6 or 7. I get done with work at 6, but I have stuff after work I can do for, writing and stuff like that. So I don't generally come down till like 8 o'clock or something like that. So the wife will be gone next week, so I'll have to be much more present next week at least. So when I get done at 6 for work, I'll have to go downstairs and take care of the child and stuff like that. I have to get up and take her to school, which will be good because I've been I haven't been sleeping well, so I've been sleeping later. So at least this will get me. Yeah. We're behind on all of our shows and everything too. So this is the video on Power Satellites by Science and Futurism with Isaac Arthur. Great video. We just finished that, and we're watching this one on on Tethered Ring, just to get us done for today. Yeah. What else did I have going on? I think I had one more thing. Nope, that was pretty much it. That's pretty much it. Oh, I got my was it voice sound mod working? So now my sound effects they're available, which is good. Right before I started the stream, the advice said go ahead and go to the system tray, right click and end voice mod, end the Stream Deck software, and then start the voice mod, and then start the other software. Then it worked fine. So at least now I know. So that stuff is available to me again. It's been a few weeks. There's a lot of background noise. Is it just when I'm speaking? Or really, let's see what we're hearing. Let's see what. Okay, so you can hear my chair at least. Okay, so you can hear my chair at least. Oh yeah. Okay, so you can hear my chair at least. Yeah, there is. Yeah. Okay, so you can hear my chair at least. Yeah, there is. Yeah. Yeah, I can hear the background too. Yeah, okay. I'll have to take a look at that. I have the, I think I've got a filter on my mic. I've got a noise gate. I'll raise it a little bit more and see if that helps. I'll raise it a little bit more and see if that helps. I'll raise it a little bit more and see if that helps. Hopefully that makes a difference. Hopefully that makes a difference. No, it's still there. Okay, I'll have to mess with that and see if I can make that better. Yeah, because what is it? NVIDIA Broadcast wasn't working so well. I was having issues with it because that was amazing for taking out the background noise. Yeah, the voice quality isn't quite as good as it was before. Maybe I can get that working again, which would be nice because it really cleaned up my voice a lot. So I don't know. We'll see. I'll have to mess with that some more. I'm gonna start it here and see if it'll work. Okay, they got a new update of it. Mode. Yeah, no, it's good to know. Thank you for telling me, because then I can look at that. It sucks that getting the new video card several months ago, I was really excited about that, so I could use NVIDIA Broadcast to clean up my audio. And then it ends up crashing a lot, which is super annoying. Hopefully the new version will be a little more stable, because I would love to use it again. Made it so clean. So clean. All right, let's I'll go ahead and start playing this. Is there anything you want to go over since you're here? Covered some stuff, but we're watching videos just because it's super quiet. Oh, okay. All right, we'll play this video, and it's about tethered rings as kind of that stepping stone to a cheaper alternative to an orbital loop, which they talked about in the previous video. But we'll get this started, and then that'll close us off for today, take us to about 1/4 and then we'll be good to go.
This episode is brought to you by Brilliant.
That's loud.
Our progress in the field of rocketry this last decade has been amazing, but to reach a future in which millions can travel to and from orbit every day, we will need freeways and train tracks to space itself. So today we are going to be looking at a space launch system, the Tethered Ring, that is a cousin to the Mass Driver, Orbital Ring, and Lofstrom Loop, 3 of our favorite active support launch systems. Now, each of those has its own episode in our Upward Bound series that you can watch for details, and it seemed right that the Tethered Ring should get its own episode too. It's a fantastic idea for hanging a non-rocket based launch system in the upper atmosphere that could make launch costs to orbit around Earth as cheap as air travel around Earth, and indeed could make travel around Earth a lot faster and cheaper too. If you haven't seen any of those episodes, they are not prerequisites to understand today's topic, but a basic understanding of them is helpful to understand how the Tethered Ring works, as is an understanding of active support. So we will cover them briefly today as a prelude to the Tethered Ring. it might be helpful to think of the active support in a tethered ring as a system for simply keeping our ring rigid, something that a potential super material might allow too. So while the coolest thing about the tethered ring is that it can be built on the Earth's surface entirely with present-day technology for a reasonable cost, for our sci-fi writers out there, it actually represents something you could have hanging on a planet without maintenance or power needs, if you had a rigid enough super material. This is a ring that hangs over a planet by being tethered to the ground, thus hangs over the ground by hanging from the ground, a somewhat counterintuitive notion that we'll explain in a bit. When its inventor, Phil Swan, explained the concept to me at the International Space Development Conference, I had a facepalm moment at the beautiful simplicity of the idea, and never thinking of it before myself. He and his team, which goes by the name the Atlantis Project, have been developing and discussing it for years, and I'm very glad that SFIA is going to be a venue to help popularize the notion, and I'll be linking to the website for it that has all the deep dives and technical details, and also a very nice app for placing the rings where you want and with various parameters you like. This is a very cool system that would work well on Earth and on many other planets too. Now, active support is seen by some as a technique for emulating supermaterials by applying large amounts of energy, and in the simplest conceptual example, it's like keeping a piece of paper floating by placing over a heat vent on the floor. Indeed, if you anchor that paper with a cord or tether to the vent and left the vent running, it would hang up there forever, and ants could crawl those tethers to the paper and hang out there and build cities there. This is active support. And so would be a helicopter or drone quadcopter that had an electric engine that you anchored to the ground with a power cable from a power plant. We could also do the same with a plane, but we'll need to fly in a circle to avoid breaking that power cable. Of course, if it was flying high and had a railgun or an electromagnetic cannon on it, a mass driver, it could launch things from that altitude, high above most of the air, and the US military has funded studies on the feasibility of launching payloads to space from high-altitude planes, which have concluded that this is plausible from a thermodynamics point of view. Indeed, that power cord could power both the floating plane and the launcher attached to it, and would be a viable space launch mechanism. I don't know of anyone having previously studied or named that approach before. It's one I've played with on and off for some years, and it has probably been thought of before, so I won't claim it and name it today, especially as it's not our focus, nor would it be very handy except for maybe a new colony planet with limited launch needs and a centralized force base, and mostly for cargo that can handle a lot of G-force. Think of it as a planetary slingshot. The topic today will essentially replace that circling plane with a much better static ring, which spacecraft can race along to launch into space at accelerations that humans would find comfortable. Active support comes in other forms too. It's the same concept for a water hose, which is a fairly floppy device, but when we run water through it at high pressure, it suddenly becomes quite stiff and rigid, but not as rigid as, say, a large ring of diamond. Generally, our discussion of active support on this show are for building giant space towers, orbital rings, or even artificial planets, and thus utilize methods for replicating materials stronger than nature seems to allow. The orbital ring, for instance, uses a giant hollow ring around the planet, stationary with respect to the ground and with magnets inside, while inside this sheath a metal ring spins at slightly faster than orbital speed, and we can speed up or slow down that ring with linear motors on the outer, stationary sheath, and we use levitation electromagnets to keep the inner ring from touching the stationary sheath while it is moving around at 10 kilometers a second or even faster. The combined momentum of both objects is kept at what is needed for orbiting Earth at that altitude, a velocity of 7.8 kilometers per second times whatever its total mass is. Total mass for itself, both inner ring and outer sheath, as well as the cargo on it, the ships, the tethers helping hold it in place on Earth so it doesn't wobble or suffer from precession, and possibly solar panels to power it. You use tethers off at an angle to keep it in place and provide transport via cable car up to the ring for people, cargo, and power, and it's an excellent launch location. With very good superconductors and magnetic shielding, this can be very low power. It is easiest to do above the equator, but so long as your tethers are strong enough, you can position your hoop at any angle around the Earth. But it's still larger than the full circumference of the planet. which implies that you need to build it in orbit, which means you need to launch material in low Earth orbit to build it, or mine the material from the moon and then bring it to low Earth orbit. On the other hand, a tethered ring has a smaller diameter and thus can be built on Earth, for example in the ocean around Antarctica or in the Pacific Ocean. These, as we'll see in a bit, are some of the options the Atlantis project team proposes. You can tap power off that inner spinning metal ring, or simply run other electricity up there to magnetically propel a space vessel along the ring until it reaches orbital speed itself and can launch off. The same is true of the Lofstrom loop, which is easier to think of as a cannon on the ground, firing metal pellets in a big parabola up into space that land far away and get turned around and fired back. And much like the inner spinning ring of an orbital ring, we can build a sheath around this and give ourselves a big launch ramp suspended in the air. We can then either leech power magnetically off the metal pellets or chain or ribbon inside the external stationary sheath, or just run a power cord up to it. Same concept for a space tower, except here we magnetically accelerate metal pellets or bolts straight up, then use magnets at the top to redirect them back down again, which counters the pull of gravity. The systems at the base accelerate the pellets back up again, and on this track we keep a large tower built, which can be impossibly tall compared to what even the strongest of tough compressive strength materials permit. Active support is very good for making things rigid or having great compressive strength, so long as you either have lots of cheap power to run it, or you have a way to minimize the power requirements. One way to approach this is to use superconductors and good magnetic shielding, but the tethered ring white paper design proposes a different approach, which is more akin to the technology used in active magnetic bearings, specifically a type of active magnetic bearing called a permanent magnet-biased homopolar linear active magnetic bearing. Don't worry, you don't need to memorize that term. Active support can also, with a little more work, be used to replace high tensile strength materials. This is the strength a material has when you pull on it rather than push on it, or when you hang a weight from it. See our ring wards episode for discussion of how, but for today's topic, tethered rings, it is worth noting we have materials that work for our tethers already, like Kevlar or Xylon. Indeed, carbon fiber will do the trick, though obviously super materials like graphene could do it even better if they could be made cheaply enough. The difference is that when we look at space elevators, we are looking at materials that need to hold vast weights up over tens of thousands of miles or kilometers, while alternatively our tethers on an orbital ring, Lofstrom loop or tethered ring, just need to hold things for tens of miles or kilometers. Still not easy, mind you, but inside the realm of materials we already have the ability to cheaply mass produce, for a given value of the word cheaply. The basic models of the orbital ring, Lofstrom loop, space tower, mass driver, and tethered ring all cost in the tens of billions of dollars. Active structures also require maintenance, and I usually assume such things parallel highways and bridges at needing about their original cost to build to be spent again over the cost of a decade or two to keep them up. And they also need a lot of energy to stay up and to launch spaceships. What's cool about them all is that it takes so much less energy per kilogram launched. So long as you're doing a lot of launching, you knock your launch costs down to maybe 1/100th what they are now, but only if you're interested in doing about 100 times as many launches a year as we do now, preferably more. Folks sometimes wonder why we don't build these things already if they're physically possible, and that's the key reason. It's like a railroad or the Panama Canal, way cheaper fuel costs once built, but only if you are moving enough freight to justify the initial cost and maintenance. So building space infrastructure makes sense when your space goals are ambitious, such as setting up and supplying human outposts on other worlds, but it perhaps makes more economic sense to use rockets if you only want to launch satellites and build a space station or two in low Earth orbit. Another reason these don't get built yet is because even though the basic physics works fine, like anything else they need prototyping, and often anticipate some technological improvements that would make them way more effective. The tethered ring is pretty simplistic and can be built smaller as a test model, so there's less worries of needing multiple generations of expensive prototypes, and it also doesn't require the cooperation of a bunch of different countries to build these prototypes. One problem with the orbital ring is that since it does have to encircle the entire planet, even if not at the equator in favor of being tipped at an angle, it still has to pass over a lot of countries and just hang in the upper atmosphere above them. So we assume permission has to be gotten from them to build it. They have good reason to say yes, as it presumably grants them ultra cheap and fast access to both space and everyone else on that ring, but the geopolitics could still be a pain. Alternatively, a full-scale tethered ring can be built and tested many meters below the surface in the ocean, in international waters. One possible location discussed in the patent is around the Antarctic continent. Another, discussed in the white paper, is around the Pacific Rim. In fact, after a tethered ring is constructed and raised, it can be moved to a better location if the geopolitical issues can be worked out, so that it can provide carbon-neutral, point-to-point, international, high-speed transit for the countries that it passes over. A tethered ring is lifted up and held up by its tethers, which can seem a bit counterintuitive. We actually hang it from tethers attached to the ground, which keep it from falling down to the ground. And we do hang it too. We have some visuals to explain this we'll be putting up on the screen, but for our audio-only listeners over on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, Audible, Amazon Music, and others, this might be a bit tricky to visualize. Picture a basketball and a metal hoop just a bit wider than it. This hoop is our normal orbital ring and can be put at any angle. Now shrink that hoop down to be a smaller radius than the basketball. It can be placed on the basketball and it won't fall down and hit the ground because gravity keeps pulling it straight down while the hoop isn't wide enough to finish dropping past the basketball once it widens out wider than the hoop. Of course, this does not result in the hoop hanging in the air, it just rests on the basketball's surface. However, Earth's gravity doesn't point down at the ground, it points in towards the basketball's center when Earth is the basketball. So a big hoop around Earth would just land on the ground wherever, as everywhere is down. Indeed, it would flop to the ground, as even a ring made of pure diamond would be as flexible as a rubber band at this scale, much like our Topopolis megastructure, a giant spinning hollow steel cord miles wide that we can literally tie in knots or loops because it's flexible at big enough lengths. Making our ring rigid is the principal role of active support here, and the only part it is required for. Just as with the orbital ring, we have a hollow tube lined with magnets, stationary with respect to the ground, and inside there will be a big metal hoop spinning at high speed, and much like water in a hose, this will make the object rigid even though it's thousands of miles long. So why isn't the ring falling down? The tether's attached to it and the ground, not space, so it's hard to picture how this is actually hanging in the sky from those tethers. If I ran guy wires up to a hot air balloon after all, those hold it to the ground, but only because it wants to move up. Shut off the hot air or replace a blimp's helium with lead, and it will fall down and those tethers won't stop it. Here's the key part. Earth is curved, and down is not in the same direction everywhere along this ring or its tethers. If you picture a very long tether running from the ground off at an angle, then as Earth curves away beneath it, the distance from it to the ground is going to rise sharply. Indeed, even a straight line running along Earth's surface is going to curve away to great height. This is how the horizon works for light moving in a straight line to your eyes from some distant object. So what our tethers are doing here, as they radiate out from the ring opposite of how spokes of a wheel go, though slightly angled down, is to reach to a distant spot to anchor the ring in a roughly straight line. Since the planet is curved, if the ring falls down, it pulls on the tethers more, thus it cannot fall down. Our ring is held in the sky by being tethered to the ground. It's a really neat trick, and if you're having problems still picturing this, then flip it around and imagine holding a ring or disc from guy wires off the side attached to tall towers. The ring is held up by hanging down from those. This is still the case, it's just that our tethers here are very long and our towers are further away, and the point where they attach is high relative to the ring, because the Earth is actually a little bit inside the ring as opposed to being entirely below the ring. Thus they don't actually need to be up in the air at all. They can be on the ground because of the planet's curvature, and because the ring's size allows it to partially encircle the planet. Of course, for a big ring, thousands of kilometers in circumference, it would droop and stretch all over the place between those tethers, pulled outward where a tether connected and drooping down between two tether connections, so the tethers are forked so they distribute their tensile forces more evenly. Also, that inner spinning ring keeps the outer stationary ring stiff and circular. Much as with the Lofstrom loop or orbital ring, we could use the kinetic energy of the spinning ring as a source of power for a launcher too, sapping speed out the ring magnetically to propel a ship up to speed. Our ring is still in the atmosphere, mind you, so it makes sense to house the mass driver within an evacuated tube and have a fast opening airlock at the end to let the spacecraft out without letting too much air leak in. We looked at this in mass drivers, and a plasma window might be an option too. The reference design for the ring is at an altitude of 32 kilometers. That is far above storms and thick air, so maintaining a near vacuum tunnel around the launch track is no problem, and those tethers also make a great way to move people, cargo, and power up to the ring. So, how big is this ring? Well, that depends on circumference, of course, and bigger is better.
This thing is still mind-boggling. I watched this the second time I watched the video, and my brain can't wrap around it. My brain can wrap around a lot of the other stuff, but this is just like, it's just mind-boggling. Mind-boggling.
In this case, as it means your ship can accelerate to higher speeds with a larger turning radius. At the ISDC this year, Phil and his colleague, Shayna, presented us the option of one running essentially around the perimeter of the Pacific Ocean as a circle, with about half its mass in the ring and half in the tethers, but the majority of the cost is in the tethers themselves, which use just over 2 megatons of carbon fiber and roughly cost, in current money, about $45 billion. There's also the transit tube, and of course the outer sheath and inner.
So $45 billion, right? How much money have we sent over to Ukraine? Hundreds of $billions. The United States could pass a law, pass a bill, and fucking build this throughout the country. I mean, the massive benefit that our country would have from having one of these just over our country, or with partners in Europe, I mean, would be mind-boggling. Yeah, it's big brains. There's so much that we are missing as a species, as a globalized civilization, by not doing this, because this connects. There's something like this. You know, it's $45 billion. That's nothing. I mean, Bezos' Virgin Galactic was going to just be given $10 billion because he was whining about it. $50 billion is nothing. It's nothing for Congress. Yeah, and U.S. military has, like, they're close to what? They're over $800 billion now, almost $900 billion per year. And this is a tenth? 45? It's not even a tenth. It's less than 10% of what they're doing a year. Yeah, it's insane. This would benefit us so much by being able to launch things into space and to connect parts of the world with much cheaper travel instead of using airplanes, and we could launch things into space too. Yeah, I mean, it's just and if this is made as a multinational, international conglomeration that was putting this together, $5 billion a pop, that's nothing. 10 countries, $5 billion a pop, big fucking deal. That's nothing. It's basically no cost on a national scale. I mean, it's just it drives me nuts. Now the orbital loop, which is the next step up, is significantly bigger. But even still, if we were to collaborate with people, maybe it's $100 billion per country putting in for the orbital loop. But still, the return on investment would be huge. This is even a larger return on investment. I mean, it's ginormous what we could do with this.
Metal hoop. The metal hoop would probably be made from iron, although any ferromagnetic material would.
So the inside part is it's like transportation. You could send people across the globe, or you could send a cargo across the globe. So it's for transportation of people and the transportation of cargo throughout the world. That's primarily what it would be used for, and then kind of a secondary bonus that they could use the tethered ring for, or orbital loop for, would be to launch things into space. They could get a long enough, path that they could launch stuff into space, so we can get things into the space station, or even possibly, if it had a rocket, I think, you could launch it into space and then have the rocket take over from there and then take it to the moon or Mars or something like that. This could drastically reduce the payload cost to get things into space. Oh, so they have, they showed it earlier, but there's a path like this, a separate one, which just is open to the atmosphere. Or one that just, it doesn't go the whole length. It goes just, here, I'll see if I can find it. What are we at? 40, 1750, okay. Nope. 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 Here somewhere. I know we've seen it. Nope. Come on, you bastard. Where is it? Yeah, right here. See? Right here, they've got like a whole different run that's just for launching things into space. And this is the one where the normal cargo and stuff would go. So they go here and bloop. Yeah, I don't like the way they've done this. This is kind of like, it seems like it's in between the webbing here, the tethers, and it should be kind of on the outside, and it should be angled up more so that it goes, towards space instead of this way. If they launch it like this way, it'll just follow the curvature of the Earth and go somewhere. So I don't like this diagram. I wonder if it's a better one. Yeah, don't see it. Does that make sense? Maybe. Fair. Yeah, this is mind-boggling. It would have a separate run where you could get something into it and then fire it through here using magnetic acceleration. It would be the same as this, just open, so you can get it into space. So these sets of tracks here just transport stuff around the ring. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It's mind-boggling that people can think this up and think of the math, think of what's possible, and do it. It's crazy for me.
Although any ferromagnetic material works, the inner ring just needs to be decently sturdy and able to be shoved on by magnets. The outer sheath can be aluminum, as it's lightweight and decently cheap, and we can also put solar panels on it to power the whole thing. A meter wide over its entire circumference is sufficient. In terms of actual energy stored in the ring, that varies by size, and much like the orbital ring, you can make these much thicker if you want, but the baseline model would have 2 × 10⁻17 joules running inside that hoop at any given moment, roughly the amount of energy that hits Earth every second from the sun. How often we need to replenish that energy overall is hard to say at this time, but at least many days, so the solar panels or perhaps a handful of modern power plants could do the job, if not less, and you could be doing much of this recharging up power cords on those tethers from the various major cities they connected to outside their peak hours when they had a solar.
Yeah, another way to power these would be the power satellites, which we watched over here. That'd be another way of doing it. Have a power satellite in space, then beam the power to the loop, and that can help keep the loop powered.
Plus, or again by hanging solar panels from the ring, Even if we needed total energy replacement once a month, which would require almost 80 gigawatts of power production to hit that 2 times 10 to 17 joules over a month, that's still not much at the global scale. However, that is a lot of juice, the equivalent of roughly 50 megaton nuclear devices, but it's all spread out over thousands of kilometers, same as car wrecks on a freeway system or a hurricane, and a hurricane contains 100 times the kinetic energy. But it is worth considering what would happen if the ring got wrecked, and whether it would damage things. If it did break, it's not a huge worry. Much like an orbital ring, all the fast-moving parts are either flying off in orbit or burning up the atmosphere like meteorites if it breaks. The bigger stationary segments could just deploy parachutes and fall gently down. I wouldn't say a thick carbon fiber tether falling down is going to be totally safe for those nearby, but it would be nothing compared to a train wreck. And this is what we're seeking to replace here. Of course, a lighter material like graphene works even better and would allow even more safety provisions, but Phil Swan and his collaborators were focused on modern and available materials, and those available in 2015 specifically when the idea was first developed. Phil told me that way back in the 1980s he had been doing simulations of space elevators and concluded that the tethers were impossible. And this was pre-graphene, and he went on hiatus with such thoughts till 2015 at a conference on space elevators. And that's where this idea was first publicly presented. It hasn't been a secret either. I'm a little sad it was around for nearly a decade and this show's entire lifetime before I encountered it. And next week marks our show's 8th anniversary, incidentally. Now again, all numbers are necessarily approximate and in modern values and technologies, but I want to step through some specifics before we close out, as well as looking at more high-tech versions and off-world use. The tethered ring reference design's height is 32 kilometers or 20 miles up. That keeps it above air traffic and weather. Transport could be directly up a vertical cable that's 32 kilometers long or at an angle, and the angle does not have to be uniform on this. You also can run cables inward or outward, not just directly down from the tether, which means that you can locate the elevator's terminuses near train stations or city centers if you wish, even if the ring doesn't pass directly over these locations. The default tether is 110 kilometers long, or 70 miles. At the anchor point, a tether is on the order of an arm's width in diameter, and it will widen slightly as it gets closer to the ring, much as a tapered tether for a space elevator does. Spacing of the tether's anchor points could be about 45 kilometers or 28 miles between each tether, but because the tethers fork on the way up to the ring, the spacing of the ring attachment points is just a few meters, feathering out to evenly grasp it. We are assuming a transit tube with a diameter of about 12 meters or 40 feet which supports 4 lanes of traffic. The cars that travel within it are 4 meters in diameter and 20 meters long, similar to the fuselage of a business jet, and these cars can switch between collector and express lanes. The mass driver's tube could support space vehicles with diameters of 12 meters or possibly more, which can obviously hold a lot of spaceship or cargo and people. More strength helps, but the current model already assumes you could have lots of observation pods and structures suspended from the ring for commerce and tourism. The view would be amazing, 400 miles or 600 kilometers in any direction. And again, a simple parachute built in one would allow it to safely drift down in event of accident or sabotage. Indeed, people in pressure suits could probably skydive down from them, adding tourist revenue. Current cost assumes about $10 a kilogram for launch to orbit, cheaper just to go up the ring for a visit or around it and back down to travel to another city. In terms of building up there, since you're adding a new weight and presumably new solar panels to add and maintain power, even though solar is a lot better at this altitude, it is still pretty pricey, $110 a kilogram of static load. So building a 10-ton lightweight restaurant pod up there would run you $1.1 million in early 2022 money, a 20-ton RV equivalent $2.2 million bucks, etc. Obviously that's still pretty small for living 3 times higher than the tallest mountain peak.
Still, they go around the ring to where around and around, and the part about money I don't like. Shouldn't matter how much something costs, and focusing on doing things cheaply isn't I? Well, right. So, I mean, they could. So you go up the thing to one of the tethers, and then you get into a pod, and then you get into one of the transport pods, and then you go. It'd end up being just like a bus, well, a train, more like a train going across. Instead of going across the nation, going across the world, you can get off at any given stop, wherever they are, and then come down. So you could get up in like Rio de Janeiro and go up the tether, get into a pod, and then go around to maybe Nevada and come down that way. Or, you know, wherever there's a tether or wherever they've created a tether down for, you know, transportation is where you could get off. It's very much like a subway or a train in that way, although much higher up and much longer distances. Still around I don't kind of submit cost, right? Yeah, I mean, as long as we have monetary systems, cost is going to be an issue. Yeah, I don't like it either, but I imagine that if they're doing something like this as on as large a scale as it is, they're not going to be going. Oh, because I thought the force inside. I don't understand the physics completely. A part of it is active support, where it's like if you have a hose and you put water through it, it's that pressure that keeps it, you know, taut. So I think that is a large part of what is keeping it up. I think that's what it showed. I still don't understand. I think use that active support, so you're firing like iron pellets through it or even water through it, the whole thing, using energy, and it just keeps going and going, and that's what keeps it up. Yeah, that's what keeps it up. So like there was what are we at? 23. Like here. So these here are the ones that are the active support things that have the energy firing things through it to keep it up. And then down here is where the pods go, and then here the tether's going to the ground. This is where you could have. Let me show you that. No, not there. That's an observation power. They showed one over here. Yeah, right here. Thank you.
Exactly up a vertical cable that's 32 kilometers long, so or at an angle, and the angle does not have to be uniform on this. You also can run cables inward or outward, not just directly down from the tether, which means that you can locate the elevator's terminuses near train stations or city centers if you wish, even if the ring doesn't pass directly over these locations. Exactly up a vertical.
Yeah, so you go up one of the tethers all the way up, and then you can get onto one of the trains, get fired through. Then right up here, yeah, what we saw earlier, there's the four things here. That's where the active support. This is what keeps it in the air, because you got that pressure when the water or whatever is going through it, it's pushing it outwards. Does that make some sense? It's a lot. I'll show it there. Yes. Where does it show all four of them? Yeah, right here. So you've got the four things here with the energy going through it, or the water or whatever, which is, you got the pressure going through it, it pushes it outward, and that's what keeps it up. Does that make some sense? I think that's how it works. I think. Yeah, it doesn't. And you do that right here. Yeah, so it goes up here, and this is where you get on here and then go through here, and then it'll stop somewhere somehow, and then get in, and then you'll keep going. And I'll be kind of curious to see how that process happens myself. How this will probably start by electricity, I think, magnetics or something like that, to keep it going and stopping. I'm not sure. Yeah, they don't go into that in this video. I wish they would, because I'd be kind of curious to see that too. Yeah. Maybe I need to read here's the project that the guy who came up with this and is promoting. Oh, Jesus, I'm sorry. Sorry to do that to you. I'll get there we go. Here's the real link. These are the people that are promoting it. I haven't looked at this myself, but I want to. So yeah, you can find out more about it there. They're the ones who are talking about, I've done the math and stuff like that.
Diameters of 12 meters or possibly more, which can obviously hold a lot of space. It is still pretty pricey. $110 a kilogram of static load. So building a 10-ton lightweight restaurant pod up there would run you $1.1 million in early 2022 money. A 20-ton RV equivalent, $2.2 million.
Oh yeah, no. It's not, yeah, it's the top level, the ones at the top, the four lines, that's where the active support is. That's the speed that keeps it up. And then that pressure from the four at the top, that's what everything hangs off of. Yeah, these four are where the speed keeps it up, and then everything hangs off it and is supported by the strength of this up here. Yeah, that would be kind of how would that math work? Yeah, I would be confused by that too. How would that work? It stops, now the speed is gone, now everything falls. What? Yeah, it's this stuff up here. Good question.
Obviously, that's still pretty small for living 3 times higher than the tallest mountain peak, or running a hotel or a restaurant there, and this baseline ring would be expected to be serving tens of thousands of people at a time. You can also overlap rings much as with the orbital ring to allow transfers between them, and as with them, your travel time once on the ring to anywhere on Earth is on order of a few hours, but getting up and down the tethers or elevators and to and from the stations they're anchored at is likely to match modern travel to airports and taxi, takeoff, and climb speeds, plus customs and security. So way faster intercontinental travel, and bigger versions of these might have bullet trains that left a ground terminal and stopped at another without pause at waypoints and average hypersonic speeds for the trip. It is a space launch system, of course, and that's its big interest to us, but that's the simple part. You electromagnetically accelerate the launch vehicle down a track once you're up there, skip beyond rocket fuel issues, and it just lets go and flies into space. You can launch at higher speeds and from higher altitudes if you want to send people and payloads directly to other planets without refueling. Alternatively, if you want to keep the capital cost of the tethered ring low, you could construct one that is closer to the ground, use it to accelerate vehicles just partway up to orbital speeds, and make up the rest of the Delta V needed for the mission with a second stage rocket or a skyhook. See our skyhooks episode for more details on those, and the Mass Drivers episode for more discussion of the specific mechanics and economics of electromagnetic catapult launches themselves. But not only does it let us get to space, it makes on-planet point-to-point travel much cheaper and faster, which is also the big selling point of the orbital ring. As with those and space towers and mass drivers, they can all be mixed and matched together to form a vast orbital skybridge network, allowing millions of people and millions of tons of cargo to move anywhere on a planet.
You could have like 2 of these on different parts of the different sides of the ring, and you get one to fire this out to go to one on the other side and one to fire it back and forth. Like a yo-yo almost. They're playing catch on these ships.
Mixed and matched together to form a vast orbital skybridge network, allowing millions of people and millions of tons of cargo to move anywhere on a planet or into orbit or down from orbit every day, and at a cost equal to or less than modern transport costs, at a fraction of the time, and being purely electric via renewable solar or nuclear energy sources. Sounds like something worth building to me, or at least prepping for a prototype of. And again, the full 100-page white paper and technical specs are all available at the website listed in the episode's description if you want the nuts and bolts. ProjectAtlantis.com. That's Project-Atlantis. Now, as I mentioned near the beginning, the active support here, in a way, is just keeping the ring rigid, And with a sufficiently advanced material technology, you could just have a giant solid ring tethered to a planet, hanging there for all time, unpowered. Also, for folks who ask about high gravity being a possible Fermi paradox solution, keeping people from space because rockets couldn't do it, this is one of those counter-arguments. The ring fabrication process lets you place it partially sunk under the ocean during fabrication as it comes out of a factory to avoid interfering with seagoing traffic while under construction. Then you turn it on and lift it under its own power out of the ocean and into the stratosphere. You can use it to bootstrap your orbital rings and other higher infrastructure into space too. Again, it's a great complementary technology of many we have elsewhere discussed, not just replacement or alternative. It works well alone or in tandem with other systems. So it gets us into space, but close out. Where else in space would we use it? Well, it works fine on a place like Mars or the Moon, though on the Moon it would be a bit redundant. We already have materials strong enough for a classic space elevator on the Moon, and we don't need an elevated track to get us over its atmosphere, as it has none, so a simple raised track above the ground to allow a nice even circle can achieve the same job. It potentially works on Venus quite well, in tandem with cloud cities, or even augmenting them, but your tether material needs to be able to handle high temperatures since you are tethering into the ground, and Venus is ultra hot. But the melting point of carbon fiber is a lot higher than even Venus's inferno-like temperatures, so it's just making sure your anchor system, which is likely to involve a winch for loosening or tightening the tether, can handle the pressure and temperature there. You can't really use a tethered ring on the surface of a gas giant, and an orbital ring is preferable there anyway. Again, they don't really serve a function on any moons too small to have atmospheres, though they would be handy on Saturn's moon Titan. Also, they are great options for any world with significant gravity and atmosphere, especially ones where either is higher than on Earth. So a lot of options for use off Earth, and for getting us off Earth, and for getting us around Earth. Not bad for a simple tethered ring, and pretty impressive for an object that so counterintuitively hangs itself over the ground by hanging itself off the ground. One of the trickier parts about today's concept was trying to explain how the tethered ring avoids falling to the ground. And this same sort of problem comes up when folks try to figure out why a kite stays up, tethered and pushed and pulled on by wind and gravity, where the wind and lift is our active support in that case. Same problem of course for wondering why clouds stay up, or astronauts do, and many folks might shrug and just accept that they do, even if it seems counterintuitive. But if those sorts of things bug you and you want the tools to understand it better, then I would recommend Brilliant.
Alright, there we go. Okay. Any last minute questions or comments before we call this a day? It's crazy. The other stuff kind of makes sense to me for physics, but this is just crazy. The wife is working and I gotta entertain the daughter a little bit. But yeah, this is pretty cool. I'll have to watch it a few more times just to get my brain around how this works. And again, it's frustrating because we could be doing this now. We could have been doing this a decade ago. Yeah, me too. There's been nobody today. You're the only person to show up, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, have a great weekend. Stay COVID-free, stay safe, and we will see you again next week. Have a great weekend, girly. Bye. Will this work? I don't think so.